Welcome to Fort Worth 148's podcast, where we meet to discuss Masonic topics and strive to build value in the brotherhood. The opinions and statements of the participants do not represent any positions or stance of any Grand Lodge or Lodge and are solely the viewpoints of the participants. Welcome back to the podcast, brothers. This is Rhit Moore, past master of Fort Worth 148.
This is Billy Hamilton, current Senior Warden of Fort Worth 148.
This is Gabriel Jagush, Junior Warden.
This is Evve Kuykendall, Master of Ceremonies of 148.
And we have two special guests with us tonight.
Hello, this is Ricky Cox, past master of Weatherford Lodge, number 51.
Weatherford Lodge? I've never heard of that before.
Phoenix Lodge.
And is that the real number?
Goodness.
You're getting Commandery mixed
yeah,
up
I
already.
am.
It's not 51.
275.
Rotten brain.
What has happened?
And who are you?
I am Paul Payton, the past master of Phoenix Lodge.
There we go, that's it.
And a couple other lodges, Phoenix Lodge 275 in beautiful downtown Weatherford, Texas, of course.
Mm-hmm. What do you all do for the Grand York-Rite Bodies of Texas? What is your title?
I am currently the Grand Sentinel of the Grand Commandery of Texas.
And what are you?
I am the current Deputy Grand Master of the most illustrious Grand Council Royal and Select Masters of Texas.
Good start.
So what's your title? What do we call you? Illustrious, sir?
Right illustrious.
Right, illustrious.
Right, illustrious.
He is right illustrious companion.
Oh, we have so many titles.
But Ricky is just Sir Knight, because eminent belongs to the title, not the person.
Right.
Egalitarianism.
that should be the way with every position. Belongs to the title, not the person.
Right, he is Sir Knight RICKY COX, Eminent Grand Sentinel.
That's actually a pretty cool one. Sentinel. That's legit.
I just
So-
sit
Well,
outside
Ricky
the door.
belongs outside
Outside the
door.
door.
So we don't have to listen to him
Yeah.
say stuff.
This is not specific to Grand Commandery. It's just in general. Ricky belongs outside.
Right.
Speaking of, what a great segue. Here we are outside recording our first live podcast in person.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Ricky's not allowed in the house. So.
That's right.
Yeah, this
He's out
is
here with his donkey and his horse.
Back to the donkey.
back to the document. Yeah, so in the history of the podcast, we've never recorded an episode of the podcast in person. This is the first time that we're actually recording an in-person episode. And so we're out on Ricky's compound out west. So,
And if you're fortunate enough right now, we've got a delightful little Facebook live stream going on right now for those of you who are lucky enough to be following our host, Billy Hamilton.
which is being manned by our delightful friend from Nederland, who I will not specify.
But he may be in the Grand Commandery line.
You got like 1 in a 700 chance of guessing right. How many people live in Nederland?
17,000. How many people want to live in Nederland? All of them.
All of them.
17 and a half.
Oh man, let's talk about our discussion question, Billy.
Okay.
Did you found this one?
Yeah, I found it actually on Reddit,
Okay.
on the Freemasonry group.
You know it's Billy's because it's long. Mine are usually a sentence
Right.
or two.
Well, and so I was like, how do I cut this down? I actually did edit this, but it's still a long question, right? My lodge is a small town lodge with between 10 and 15 regular members attending meetings. Many of the chairs this year have been filled with past masters. Overall, I couldn't ask to be in a more friendly and welcoming lodge, and I am very lucky to be surrounded by such great people. I became a Master Mason earlier this year and will be joining the officers' line in November. It has been mentioned to me that I might be wanted for a range of chairs, anywhere from Junior Deacon to Senior Warden, which is very flattering. But my concern is that I would be shortchanging my own experience of Freemasonry and making the learning curve steeper as I move along. Am I being unreasonable if I said to the lodge that I would like to move along the line chair at a time in the right order? So,
What do you guys think?
Who would
Don't
take
get
his
me
place?
started on lines.
Yeah, but I mean, and the bottom line is who would take his place? If there's somebody there that could viably take his place, well then yeah, you slow down and enjoy yourself. But
right.
if not, you're gonna end up creating an environment you don't want to be a part of.
You're going to let somebody take control that really shouldn't be there.
Right.
And now all of a sudden you're not going to like your lodge, and you're going to quit coming, find reasons to quit coming. So that's a precarious situation to be in. You got to figure out who's there to back you up.
Right.
Because if nobody's there, you better take those reins. 'Cause
Right.
you'll regret it if you don't.
Well, and that's the question, right? Are there other strong leaders in the lodge? And it's not evident from the post.
Yeah, it sounds like there's not.
Well,
Right.
and one of the things he says is, he says, I couldn't ask to be in a more friendly and welcoming lodge, and I'm very lucky to be surrounded by such great people. So it sounds like the overall situation of the lodge is pretty good, right?
Like he'd have the support he needed, yeah.
Right.
Sure.
So it doesn't seem like it would hurt him or the lodge too bad, because even though they're recycling past masters, it seems like there's a good group. They maintain the lodge well. I don't know that he or the lodge would lose out too much if he said, hey, listen, I don't want to start my career at Senior Warden. I'd like to be Junior Deacon, please.
Well, the thing is in every lodge, you don't got to be the master to make a difference. Your leadership skills can start at the Tyler level. You just need to be there and contribute. Being the master doesn't mean that you're going to change. You can change things from any seat.
A healthy lodge, they should
Yes.
be able to, absolutely. Because if the only place that things change is in the east, your lodge has got bigger problems.
Right.
Yeah.
I agree.
So he would be good just to say, hey, if he wants to go through each seat, then he can still make a difference and he can still be a leader.
He needs to serve where he can best help the lodge.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's common sense.
And that is one of the benefits of the progressive line, which, I'm not for the progressive line as a method of choosing who should lead, but as a method of training people to
Sure.
lead, I think it's a great tool.
Two big differences.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Right.
so as a training tool, I think it's great. So if he says, hey, listen, I want to train my way from Junior Deacon to Master, then hell yeah.
Right. Instead of the old theory where the master gets to pick who's going to replace him in 4 years to go through the chairs.
Ugh.
No, that's not the way it is.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be that way.
No kingmakers.
There you go. I totally agree with that statement.
Okay.
Was that our only one?
Yeah, that was.
that's our...
It was long enough. Wasn't it?
That was.
That was a longer question than a discussion.
We can drag it out longer if you want.
Get to
No.
work.
We can pull discussion questions from Texas Freemasons and then just
Well, I think
shake
that-
our heads violently.
Well, I think most of the content is going to be with our guests,
Yeah.
right? And I don't think that is going to be a short conversation at all.
No. So this is a Fraternal Spotlight episode.
Shenanigans.
Shenanigans, yeah. We've been kicking around two different titles for this episode. One is Shenanigans, and then the other one is the Weatherford Yorkite Power Hour. Looking at
I thought that was.
I heard Rhit's eyes
John-
roll right there.
Rhit, I think you rolled your eyes so hard you sprained something.
It sounded like John Lennon on that song "Girl" there on the recording. So,
Bring in the Beatles reference.
there you go.
So our special guests are, as stated before, Ricky Cox and Don Paul Payton. Let's kick off with some personal questions. Tell us about yourselves outside of the Masonic lens. What do you do not in the fraternity?
We'll go in alphabetical order. You first, Ricky.
That's not alphabetical.
Oh, that's right.
Last name first.
Yeah.
So,
Are you familiar with how alphabetical order works?
Obviously not. I couldn't count earlier today, so it cheats at school. So, outside of the fraternity, I live on a farm with my wife, and we run quarter horses and have a pig, and we run an air conditioning company, and she has a vet clinic, and it keeps us pretty busy. But it leaves me a lot of time to do my hobby, which is basically doing masonry. So couldn't have a much better hobby than that. So then just kind of hang out with you guys. So
That
Well, it
seems like a
sounded
terrible
fun.
waste of
It
time.
took a steep dive there at the end. Go ahead, DP.
go ahead, Don Paul.
Well, I'd say,
Go ahead,
of
Billy.
course,
You work for Pesky's, right?
yes, that's it. Exactly. I work at Teskey's. I've been there 15 years, I believe. I'm married, of course, to my awesome, lovely wife that most everybody knows that's around me. We have 4 amazing kids, 4 boys. Just had our most recent son 3 months ago. 4 boys. I know.
I only got 1.
But,
I'm a little behind the curve here.
but we live out in God's country, out in Brock. And if people don't know, God's country runs from Weatherford up to the Panhandle around Turkey, Texas, and Hall County and back. It's an odd shape, but you can look it up. It's in there.
You can look it up.
We
Would you
installed those
Google
guys
that?
out in Turkey, out in Matador.
The Matador, Texas.
Yeah.
Would you describe God's country as anywhere you have had a postal address?
Yes, as a matter of fact. That's pretty spot on there, Gabe. But as I said, we run some Hereford cows around the house, nothing too crazy, just to keep our taxes down. Got a great life, a great family, and a lot of great friends. Of course, I'm around most of the Masons in Texas, especially around Weatherford and Tarrant County every week. And my wife, as she was going through some of these questions that's going to be asked, my time-wise, how do I fit that into my life? And she's ready to hear that answer to that question. So you got I've been thinking about it for a good day and a half.
We got an extra
So what you're
listener.
telling me is that we've put up a trap for you.
Yes. So my wife has no idea that what these podcasts are, the Masonic podcast, but she's going to be listening to this one, I guarantee you.
Oh boy!
Good deal. Before we move on, though, you were partly responsible for the boots, right? That have took the internet by storm last Grand Lodge, right?
That's right. Of course, Rhit Worshipful now, Brad Billings, and myself came up with the boots, the Masonic boots that if you've been on Texas Freemasons or something like that, has the tools, saddle vamp of the square and compass. I've done commandery boots, chapter and council boots, but the good thing about it is Rhit Worshipful and myself decided we wanted to do something for the library museum, the Grand Lodge building. That's our home. I'm passionate about that. We need to keep it. That represents Masonry. For me, that's our home.
Mm-hmm.
Not in a hotel building
Yeah.
once a year somewhere throughout the state. Embassy Suites, even though I love their hotel, but that's not my Masonic home.
Yeah.
It's that Grand Lodge building, the Library Museum there in Waco, Texas. And I just went down there a couple weeks ago. Billy went down there with me, and we donated another $2,000 to the Library Museum from the sales, the profit off of the boots. So we're around $8,000 to $9,000.
Wow. That's wicked awesome.
Yeah, that's pretty amazing.
Thanks to the Masons in Texas that purchase these boots and wear them proudly.
And
Not-
outside of Texas.
So-
Not just Masons of Texas. Whenever this whole thing started, it was crazy. I thought, we'll do a little bit, raise some money for. It went crazy.
It did.
My whole job at Teskey's was answering phone calls from Masons throughout the United States. Of like, hey, what's this for? And I said, well, the proceeds go toward the Library Museum of the Grand Lodge, and they'd be ordering boots, and it just got overwhelmed. It was crazy.
That's awesome. That's a great idea. That
Yeah.
was a great idea. So I had to bring it up.
So that's something to keep in mind, folks. The boots, if you see the Masonic boots from Teskey's, it's the ones from Teskey's that the proceeds go to the Grand Lodge Library and Museum. So you gotta get the OG boots from Texas,
There you go.
from Teskey's.
Right. That's awesome, though, that Masons from all over are really supporting our Grand
Sure,
Lodge
and
building.
I do. Most recently, a guy called me from Oklahoma. 3 of his buddies. As long as you do them in groups of 3, it makes the boot building process a lot faster. Of course, they're made here in Texas, and it takes a little bit of time to get a boot. It's not a factory, a huge factory that's punching out 4,000 pair of boots a day. It's true craftsmen. They take time, just like making a firearm or a rifle or whatever. Anything that's handmade is going to take a little bit of time. But a guy called, and they wanted different tops, a different logo on the top of the quarter for their lodge. And I did it. And, of course, I did the commandery boots for Dallas Commandery. Just something
Beauseant.
unique. It was Beauseant boots. Anything unique. I'm all into custom. As you've been around me I like unique things. Not
Do you
like,
still do the Grand Master boots?
We do. We started that. That started with Orville O'Neill. Rob works for Orville O'Neill.
2010?
Was the first Grand Master that we ever made a pair of boots for, and then of course Gene Carnes.
Yeah. I was there for Wendell's.
Randall Rogers. Walt
Yeah.
Rogers.
Walt
He was my Grand Master. I was his deputy for him, but yes, sir. We're still doing that.
Awesome. Well, your job's way more interesting than Ricky's.
Ma'am, I need to charge you for this $20,000 AC unit. I'll take cash.
Cash always.
Although your job is cool, Ricky.
The luckily, I have a lot of good people that work with me, and that allows me to hang out with this guy and travel all over the state. So, one thing about the boots that made it so popular was social media. No people in other states would have never even seen the boots if it wasn't for social media, and that's helped out the contributions to the Grand Lodge Library and Museum tremendously.
But that's how I met Ricky. Was from his AC business.
Yep.
He was living in south of Weatherford on 51 before he moved up here. And I was in 2 houses ago. My wife likes to move. But we'll move houses down the street, buddy. It's crazy. No, anyway. But we have more kids, so we need a bigger house.
She's going to be listening.
I know. I'm trying to keep it right. But we had some problem with an AC unit, and I said, "Hell, there's this guy. He's a Mason. He's on Facebook all the time. Let's call him." And he came out, and I've met him through Facebook, and he was a Mason, Haltom City, Riverside. Of course, I was here in Weatherford, and that's how we met. Really?
Yeah, and he met my wife. We were up there because she likes to frequent Teskies, and he said, "Hey, are you in the York RITE?" And I said, "No, never even thought about it." And so he was talking to her about it, and she comes over there and she goes, "I think that's something that you'd be interested in." Yeah. And the next thing you know, I'm freaking getting initiated.
What a salesman.
So, here we are on Ricky's patio upstairs. So, it's crazy. You think about it.
And there you go. The power of social media, building bridges.
That's right.
Note
so
to self.
what you're telling me is that Ricky is your fault.
Eesh.
we do have
If
that
you
on
put it that
record.
way, I might get a bunch of death threats. But, no, I'm joking.
I can tell you, he's got those 4 boys, but he might as well own Cutter, my boy, because Cutter, he joined Masonry, and he joined this lodge, and he started going there, and he goes, "Well, Dad, I thought DP was a member there." I was like, "No," he goes, "Well, that's why I joined."
Oh, man.
Good kid. He's a man.
Yeah,
Now.
he's
Yeah.
nice.
Hard to believe.
Big old boy.
So when did y'all join, and how old were you when you joined?
Joined Masonry?
Yeah.
Well, I'm pretty simple. Of course, my family's been, I've got a long Masonic history in my family, but personally, I joined, speaking back in the day, whenever AOL was on dial-up, and it ding, ding, ding,
You got mail.
and did all that, and Facebook, or AOL was these chat forums. Remember that, Gabe? This is before your time.
No,
I
I
remember that.
actually
Chance, don't be
have
looking at me
living
like you know
memory
what I'm
of those.
talking about.
I didn't account.
I know, Rhit and everybody here, they know what I'm talking about, but you went on to AOL.com and there's all these people talking about nothing, but it was the coolest thing in the world because you were on the internet.
Kind of like this.
Yeah.
Right.
That's very true.
Anyways, I got online and I was 20 and I was fixed to turn 21. Of course, my grandfather's a Mason. My whole family's been Masons. And I said, I need to join a lodge. Well, my grandfather was a member of 841 Yellow House, 841 in Lubbock, which is the oldest lodge in Lubbock. Was a huge lodge, had tons of members. Still has quite a few members. But so I went online and I looked up, Yellow House Lodge, and looked up the number, and their secretary, they have a different secretary. Of course, he's a friend of mine, Bob Murders at the time. And I knew Bob Clemens. Grew up around him, and Dan Redmond, he signed my petition. He lived a block over from where I grew up. And I called the lodge, and nobody answered. So I Googled or they didn't have Google back then.
Right?
Ask Jeeves.
Golly, I
Web
sound
crawler.
old. But got online, and I was still looking, and I typed in Masonic Lodges Lubbock. And Mackenzie Lodge, 1327, pulled up. They had an actual web page. And I called, and a guy answered. His name was Jack Morrison. He was the secretary of Mackenzie Lodge at this time. This is in 2000. Seems like a long time ago, almost 20 years. And he answered the phone and says, "Hey," I said, "I'm interested in being a Mason. My grandpa's a Mason. What do I need to do?" And he goes, "I tell you what, we're having a stated meeting. Come on up here and meet some of the guys." So I go up there. Of course, I already have my petition filled out from all the Masons that I know, and it's on my 21st birthday.
Oh, nice.
Coincidence. So I go in there. The guys are super nice. And they said, "Well, we got to go into a meeting. You can't go in." And they start putting on aprons. And I'm like, "What? What's going on? I don't know if I need to be doing this." And I asked my grandpa, I said, "Well, what is all this thing about?" And he goes, "Boy, if it's good enough for John Wayne, it's good enough for you." And that's how it sounds kind of corny nowadays, but that's what he said.
Yeah, it wasn't back then.
So my investigation... Can I still continue talking?
Yeah, you're fine.
Okay. I don't want to interrupt Ricky.
No problem.
So my investigation committee consisted of a captain of the police department in Lubbock and a sergeant and an ex-San Antonio firefighter. And the captain later became the mayor of Lubbock at this point in time. And he says, "Just meet me over at my house." Here I am, 21 years old, going to this guy's house I've never met in my life, but I know he's a cop. So I go over there, and he has this huge library, like you see the Scottish Rite library, and you know, there's books everywhere in there, like an Olin Mills studio. And these guys ask me these questions, and
He's hitting glamour shots.
That's where his mind
Glamour
goes when he
shot.
sees a library. This
But,
would make a good backdrop.
an Olin Mills backdrop. Is this Napoleon Dynamite? Anyway, go through this deal, and then they call me and says, "Hey, you're ready to go." So I go. The only person in there that I know is my grandfather. I don't know anybody else.
Oh boy.
Nobody. I have no affiliation. At that point in time, I believe, of course, Jimmy Wilson was there, who's a past Grand Master of Texas. And then a guy named by the name of Bob Vickers was there. He was the secretary. And the degree went perfect, went good. Everything was good. It was amazing, but it was done by the older group of guys, I guess you'd say, that knew what they were doing. And my dad petitioned the month after I did, because I went through, back in whenever I went through, there was no time frame. You didn't have to wait so many days. I think that law changed in 2001, so I was initiated July the 20th and raised August the 22nd. So I went through, of course, I was all in, self-examined, everything, and then, of course, by Grand Lodge that year I had a certificate, but now I conferred my dad's degrees. Because
Nice.
he didn't join until a month. I was already a Master Mason, so I conferred all of his degrees and did a couple of other parts that I really enjoyed doing.
That's awesome.
That's cool.
I was hoping that story had a climax.
Me too.
All right, Ricky, go ahead with yours.
Are you accusing him of being long-winded? Is that what that is?
No,
I don't get to talk because Ricky's always talking.
That had a good ending.
This is
so
true.
Ouch.
The build-up, the climax met the build-up.
There you go.
Well, I was in air conditioning school in Weatherford, Texas, and these guys that were in there, some of the guys that were teaching the school, they had belt buckles on that had the square and compass, and they were always real nice to me. And whenever I graduated, I was like, I want to do that. So I went to my brother, and I'm adopted, so my brother's like 20 years older than me. And I told him, I said, "Hey, I think about joining this organization." And he goes, "What organization?" And I didn't say the Lions Club, so I told him the Masons. And he goes, "I've been a Mason for 25 years. His kids didn't even know it. I didn't know it, and I lived with him, grew up and stuff. And
Oh, wow.
so, because he was in that era where you didn't tell.
Yeah, you didn't talk about it.
So I went and I petitioned the lodge, and they said, put the petition in the mailbox outside. This at Haltom City. And I filled it out, and I was nervous as can be. Nervous. And I put my petition in there. It's 2000, 2001. And never heard anything from them. So I'm a little brash.
Yeah.
So I go up there, and I'm like, did I do something wrong or what? Because I figure, hey, if they didn't want me, you know, it's not going to matter. So they said, we never got your petition. I said, y'all told me to put it in that mailbox. They go out there, and it's been like 3 months. They open the mailbox, and it's still in there. So I went through my degrees, and it was a lot of fun. Back then, Haltom City Riverside had like 800-plus members, and they put it on me. I'm not kidding you. Put it on me. Every degree put it on me, and it was a lot of fun. They made it fun. Some good guys. We just did a York Rite degree on one of the guys' son, Buddy Dunning, back then, big guy, and he put it on me, and we just initiated his son, Chuck Dunning, into the York Rite last week at Texas. So, but that's pretty much how I got into the lodge, and it was pretty cool. I went on my first cruise right after that, and I had a hat on given to me by Jack Jeter. And it said, Texas Mason, Texas Proud. And I got up there, and I'm adopted, and that was after they changed the laws. And the lady said, I can't let you on the cruise. You don't have a birth certificate. And I said, I'm adopted. This is all I have, a little cardboard thing with your foot on it. She said, you got a passport? I said,
Cardboard?
yeah, a little cardboard. This back before. You know, so
it's like the turn of the century.
it is. So,
It was made out of
it
papyrus.
was two
It
different
was a
color
rock
inks.
with a chisel.
So,
Yeah. You don't know this, but Ricky actually knew
You
Albert
said
Pike.
cardboard.
Yes.
We,
So,
we couldn't afford paper. We just used the box the stuff came into the house.
and you notice how I was
Bringing up
quiet.
bad memories
Yes.
here.
So I told the lady, I said, well, all my family's getting on the boat except for me. I can't go back to Fort
It's
Worth.
not like the Mayflower.
So she calls this guy over there. he goes, I said, look, here's my Social Security card, all this. He looks at all my stuff, and my Mason card was in there, and he puts it all in the envelope, and he says, have a good cruise, and I start to walk off to get on the boat. And he said, hey, you forgot something. So I'm pulling money out of my pocket, thinking he wanted money. He goes, that's not what I want. And he gave me the handshake. And I was like, oh, wow. And it was
That's
pretty
cool.
cool. Yeah. And so that was one of my first experiences with Masonry after I became a Mason. And there was a guy named Boots Baker, and it was his Potentates cruise, and I didn't know that. Everywhere we went, he would come up there, and he would give us cigars and drinks and stuff for, like, me and my nephew and everything.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
That's legit.
And you said that when you were joining, you said you were afraid that like they wouldn't let you join, right?
Heck yeah, I'd read all these books and stuff, and look, you know, of course, I had something different than Jeeves Google over here, so
It was AOL.
AOL stuff. So
Chat room.
I actually checked out the Masons, and there was some bad stuff, and there was some good stuff, and I said, you know what? I looked at all these men that had been Masons, Sam Houston, George Washington, all these guys, and I said, those are some pretty intelligent guys. You're not going to fool that many people. So, but the whole
like a
time,
timeshare.
I'm also thinking, it could be. The whole time I'm thinking, man, do I rate?
Where's the golf clubs at, folks?
Do I rate with these guys, you know? So I was kind of nervous, you know, because I'd read, you know, all these great men were members. And in my head, I was thinking, hey, do I stack up with these guys?
Yeah.
Well, like Ricky says, you think of you see these famous people, MacArthur, John Wayne, all these people, George. But I'd say the most famous Mason I ever met was the guy that taught me all my work.
Yep.
Hands down,
100%.
T.J. Jones. He was the one, and that's where and Rhit, you got the ritual bug. Most of us up here have the ritual bug. And that guy right there, that's I put T.J. Jones ahead of any famous Mason I can think of. He was the man.
Yeah.
Hands down.
Because he cared about you.
There,
You know?
we all know there's that. I don't know if we're getting on this subject, but there's that special bond you have between your instructor. Because after I received my EA, I didn't know anybody. My grandfather didn't know any of the work, and he said they pulled me off to the side, and the other guy was Rudy Richter, and he was an old World War II bomber pilot, and TJ worked for Frito-Lay forever. He says, we got a long road to hoe. You meet me at my house and pick me up at 6 o'clock tomorrow. And I said, okay, where do you live? And he happened to live a couple of blocks from me. And I went and picked him up. Never met the man. I met him that night. And the next day I'm picking him up at his house. And he goes, let's drive to the lodge. And on the way driving to the lodge, we started going over the ritual. And we got there. We did the ritual. And there's something special about that bond. It's very hard to describe, but it's something you can't get by not having an instructor.
Yeah, there's something about that mouth to ear.
And that's actually I wish I could relive learning the work and kind of stumbling through it bit by bit, because one of the coolest, some of the coolest memories I have in Masonry are of sitting at my instructor's house and, I learned the work with a cigar in one hand and a shiner in the other.
Well,
we just sat there and our sessions would go for hours just because we'd stop and talk about, hey, what does this question mean, Or we'd just wander off into personal life and stuff.
Do you think new candidates today that you teach feel the same way you felt about your instructor?
That's a tough one.
We are talking about Rhit.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
I mean, but you think about it, and a good friend of mine just became one of my best friends in the world. Just became master of Harmony Lodge out in Morganville Lodge. And I taught him his work, and we were great friends, played golf all the time together. And I tell you, there's nothing more special when you see somebody that goes into Masonry, that you teach them their work, and they stay with it, and now he's master of the lodge, and I'm super proud of him. But I hope people look at me that I teach.
Yeah.
We have that bond together like I had with my instructor.
Yeah, and I mean it is all relative too. But I mean, because my mentor, he was 90 something or 80, late 80s when I first met him. So there was a special moment of bridging that gap with the older generation. But more so, he was placed in my life at a time that it just changed me so much. I don't think I've had that effect on guys the same way, just because it wasn't that time in life, I was right at the cusp of being a knucklehead kid, 24, and then I run into this guy that I had no business really, connecting with, an 88-year-old man, and I'm 24, and then all of a sudden I connect with him, and he just starts bleeding into me what it is to be a man, and it shaped my life, my Masonic career, and everything, and to where I would love to think I've had that influence on guys I've taught, but I don't think I've had that chance yet. I don't think he ever had a mentee like me before. He taught many, many men their work, but for some reason it was like, Masonic soulmates, if you will.
I'm right.
Well, I think there's also something kind of interesting about that kind of relationship too, because I'm sure that your mentor, Rhit, you are just I don't mean this in a negative way, but you are another guy that he was mentoring.
Yeah.
And those people kind of, it's almost like a meat grinder for them, training, teaching the new people. And for us as the people who are being mentored, I remember my mentor, Nate Fuller, he's probably forgotten more about Freemasonry than I'll probably ever know. I think he's the secretary now at McKinney, St. John's 51. And I mean, my first time learning with him, I felt like the biggest idiot because he knew everything, and I knew nothing. He's sitting there, and I'm fumbling through even trying to repeat what he's saying.
Yeah.
And there's just something I'm not sure that I'll ever feel that way about being a mentor for someone. But the interesting thing is, I'm sure that there's going to be somebody that we're going to interact with, all of us, who has that same memory about us, whether we're aware of us having that influence on them or not.
Sure.
And that's kind of the interesting thing about that mentor-mentee, attentive ear situation that I think we all end up going through as Masons.
And talking about that, how is Billy teaching? He's teaching his boy the work. I mean, that's that's a completely different deal. There's no way I could probably teach my kid the work.
I know. There's advantages to it because whenever there's a quiet moment, it's like, come here, we're going to go over the work.
Well, it's not like he can say no either.
It's not like your last name.
I suppose he could, but
right. I mean, if we're driving somewhere together, it's like, all right, let's go over.
Good people.
When is there a quiet moment? Ever? Never?
You know what? Actually, my wife is really good at that. If I'm like, hey, we were talking about going over to work. She's like, I'll go upstairs, or I'll go to the store.
I'll go shopping.
Yeah.
Shopping.
Does your wife listen too, Billy?
Listen to the
podcast? You're
No.
just being really sweet. I was just wondering.
I was wondering that also.
Yeah. So she comes from a Masonic family, so she knows. She's like, if you're doing Mason stuff, I'm going to go do my own
I
thing.
hear you.
Yeah. That's I count myself lucky because my wife and I started dating. I got knighted right after we started dating, and then 6 months after that, I joined the Scottish Rite. So my wife has never known anything other than this insanity. Like,
Oh yeah.
Hey,
you know,
we go everywhere, and probably one of the worst things she did was introduce me to DP because we go everywhere. And I tell people all the time, I say, I got a really understanding wife and a really long cable toe.
yep.
So
It's funny. Well, I met. Quick story. My wife, she was working at Teskey's, and back in the old Teskey's, there was about 6 of us there. There wasn't very many of us, and she was just graduated from high school, and she was all dressed up one day. It was on a Saturday.
DP was like,
And I said, where are you going? She goes, I'm going to something you wouldn't know nothing about. And I said, okay. Of course, we weren't dating or anything at this point in time. I said, okay. So she leaves, and she has a flat tire on her pickup. And I said, well, I'll sit here and wait till your dad comes. So her dad comes. Has a Masonic ring on, Eddie Luard. I said, oh, what lodge you go to? Oh, I go to Ridgely, da-da-da-da-da-da, and here we go. And she goes, you're a Mason? I said, I am. I've been a Mason, quite a long, back then, it was, 6, 7 years. Already a past master, McKenzie, in 03. And she goes, my grandfather goes to Phoenix. I said, well, who's your grandpa? She said, Ben Luark. I said, I know him. Because I had started visiting Phoenix and Weatherford. And, of course, if you know Masons in Tarrant County, everybody knows Ben. He's 91. He confers, gives lectures, does everything, York Rite, everything, but...
He's our honoree this year.
That's right. Honoree at the York
Next
Rite
week.
Festival
Yeah.
this coming week. That's right. And so that's how I get away with it. Because I say, how are we going to spend some time with your grandpa tonight, babe? And, she
Quality
doesn't say
family
anything.
time.
No.
Oh,
my wife's
that's
always
great.
like, your boyfriends are calling.
What inspired you guys to join? So we heard how old you guys were and some of the circumstances around you joining, but what was it that kind of sent that spark that you guys were like, I gotta go join this?
I'll let you go first.
I was just at a point in my life where it was like I had friends and stuff, and I was doing things. Some of them might not have been just the best things I should be doing, and I decided that there's got to be something more. And I wanted different people in my life. So that was one of the things that drew me, because all the people I had met that were Masons, and you don't really meet a whole lot if you're not really paying attention, they were men that I felt like I wanted to be like. And, I told you my parents were old when they adopted us, and so I didn't really, and they were strict, so we weren't allowed to do a whole lot of stuff. So whenever I started going to AC school, it was like, hey, these are some pretty cool guys that they cared about people. And you don't meet very many people like that in the world today. So that's kind of like what made me say, hey, I want to be in this organization. So it's kind of what inspired me.
So mine would be there's an old family legend. Of course, I'm big into genealogy and all that stuff. So my third great grandfather, my family's from Georgia, and I've told some people this. He was they lived around Meriwether County in Georgia, and during the Civil War, his brother and there was 4 boys. They all joined the Confederacy. At that point in time, my third great grandfather was a sergeant at Andersonville Prison, which is pretty pretty bad place to be during the war. And after the war, he had some problems, and they put him in a hospital there in Milledgeville. But I have his Masonic records before the war, where he was junior warden, senior warden of a lodge, along with his brothers, so they were all there. And the story, the family lore is, they got on a ship. He was in the hospital. My grandmother took the rest of the kids and got on a ship that belonged to a bunch of Masons, and came up from Georgia up to the coast of Texas, and came up around Waco, McClellan County, and then eventually worked its way up to God's country there in Hall County, Turkey, Texas. And so that was kind of, and my grandfather always wore a ring, so I knew as soon as I turned 21, I was in.
Yeah.
I was going to join. That was just, I was just waiting.
So you had that strong family background.
Yes.
And then obviously we covered what lodges you joined and why.
Lodges we joined.
Or I guess, what the first lodge was.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So we got that one. What offices have y'all held? Obviously both of y'all are past masters. So you have been master at one point in time. What else, in addition, did y'all hold both wardens' offices? Were you part of the whole traditional progressive line? Did you jump into the middle of it?
That goes back to that originally that Billy said.
Yeah, the discussion question.
So when I was raised in 2000, and things, Masonry, now sound like the older generation, Masonry has changed amazingly, because I've been an active Mason for almost 20 years. Mm-hmm. When I joined in 2000 in Lubbock, when you conferred a degree, of course I learned the work just as fast as I could, was conferring degrees within a month. But when you conferred a degree and you were in that station, wherever it might be, in the east, west, south, whatever, you did everything that came in that whole area.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That because there was nobody else there to do it.
Yeah.
That was just the way it was. And that's probably why I learned so many. I got on the ritual thing, and I love ritual. I always look at RIT because we're part of that 2% of Texas Masons that have a certificate, but that was expected of you to do that because nobody else could do it. Everything in that whole vicinity of the area of the degree. And then I went in as senior deacon the first year in 01, and then from there I was going to the junior warden dropped. I went to the south, junior warden, and then the senior warden, something happened, and he didn't want to go on, and I was elected of Master of McKenzie Lodge in 2003, 2004, so but I served where my lodge needed me. That's what I was saying earlier today.
Yeah, right.
You need to go where your lodge needs you the most.
How about you, Ricky? How did that path go for you?
Well, it took the long road. Whenever I joined, I didn't care nothing about going through the chairs because I didn't even know what the chairs were whenever I joined. So I had no interest in going through the chairs. I learned the work, studied the work all the time, even if I wasn't at lodge. And it's kind of addicting for some reason. It's real addicting. And just, I thought, okay, this is fun. I like it. I really like being a member. And I can do tons of stuff without going through the chairs. And then I came to Phoenix, and I started doing degrees. And DP and me would go places, and we'd work in degrees. And I went out to a lodge in Joplin, Texas. And they had 6 guys out there. Most of them were past masters, and had a membership of like 30-something people. And I did a degree for them, and the guy said, that made my hair stand up on the back of my neck. And he goes, would you think about coming out here? So, of course, I talked to DP about it because we just moved here. And he said, that'd be a great thing to do, go out there, and help them. Went out there and went through the chairs, started out at Senior Warden. The master got sick that year, so I was master the rest of the year, and then I was master for a full year, and it was a lot of fun. We raised a lot of money, and we had a good time. Like that little lodge of 30-something people, it'd have 300 people there, some days. And then I was also going through the chairs out at Weatherford, and I started, because that's a big lodge, and I started at the door at Junior Warden and worked my way around, and Junior Deacon, at Junior Deacon, and worked my way around, and whenever I got to the south, it was pretty cool, because I knew, hey, I'm going to be master of this lodge. And whenever I became master there, and it was pretty fun. A big difference between a small lodge where you're doing everything with a small group of guys and a much bigger lodge.
You bring all the, like in Lubbock, the master brings the meal. That's just part of it, buddy.
You brought
Congratulations. You're the master. Where's the chicken and the green bean?
You did it all. You do it all.
So that's not something that the junior warden would take care of?
Where?
At smaller lodges? Mm-hmm. No, usually somebody brings something. Everybody brings
We're
something.
lucky if the junior warden remembers to bring the law book, Dave. Come on. He can't bring the food, too.
One thing at a time. I got it.
And then we both have been past high priest, past TIM, and then he was past commander in 2014. 14, and then I was past commander in 18 out at Weatherford. So
we sound old.
I know.
Y'all are
all these years. Remember back, Ricky, when we were high priest?
When I was high priest, that's actually a sentence
we rode wagons to lodge.
You rode wagons to lodge.
Y'all both been
Did you walk
DDGMs,
uphill
right?
both ways?
Yes.
Sir.
What?
2013 I was for Walt Rogers.
Weren't you an officer at one point too?
Yeah,
An appointed officer?
Grand Junior Warden. Grand Junior.
No, you promoted yourself
sir.
there.
We're predicting the future now.
I was Grand Junior Deacon for Right Worshipful Mike Wiggins, and then I was Grand Pursuivant for Right Worshipful Tommy,
the jewel holder,
Frank Chapman.
And I was lucky enough to be his deputy. So
that's right.
I'll tell y'all one thing, that whenever I was his deputy, and it was a hard year for me, and I had some really good friends that year, but I was hauling down to the ranch in Bryan College Station with my wife, and I'd just been diagnosed with cancer, and my phone rang, and we were right there at Waco where that Starbucks is, and we pulled over, and it was Grand Master Chapman, and he hadn't become Grand Master yet. We were just a little bit out from it. He called me to tell me that everything was going to be okay, and I told him, I said, you know what? If you need me to not be your deputy, I understand, because I didn't know what was going to happen.
Yeah.
And he told me, he said, you know what? Everything's going to be okay.
Yeah.
And
it awesome.
Really, really touched me, because he didn't have to call me. It's crazy. He called me, and Gene Carnes called me. And two guys that they didn't need to call me for any reason at all, but they called me to check on me and make sure everything was okay. And a lot of that,
I feel bad because I didn't call you.
You were always there. The crazy thing is, like I tell people all the time, I say, Masonry is more than just going through the chairs or learning the work. It's about the relationships that you build.
Yeah, that's
the friendships. And we've built a lot of friendships traveling around the state, meeting people. I'd have never met all those guys out there in Turkey and stuff if it wouldn't have been for you.
That's right.
Yeah, and I remember when you got your diagnosis, everybody was, you went on a lot of prayer lists really quick. And wasn't that not too long after a sitting district deputy grand master passed away?
Yes.
Yeah. So that was kind of like we had just been to this funeral that was very moving, very sad, and then you got your diagnosis, and that was.
But it meant a lot whenever that phone rang, and I was like, "Who the heck is that?" And I answered it, and it was him. It was Grandmaster to be Chapman, and he and DP was going to be his pursuivant, and I was pretty honored that I was going to be on the team with these guys. And
the A team,
the A team,
and he told me, he said everything's going to be okay, and he was right.
It was a good year. It was a great year. Had a good time.
So what do you guys see as the biggest strength and the biggest weakness of our fraternity? So,
ooh, man, is this going to be on Recorded?
Come on now.
And it's live.
And it's live.
Wonderful.
Oh, man. Strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah, top strength,
Okay.
top weakness.
I'll get into part of it, and I'm going to let Ricky finish it. Weaknesses, and everybody says throughout the state that I hear a lot of people say, we have a membership program, and I've said this for years.
Problem.
Most of y'all here have probably heard me say this.
You mean problem?
Problem.
Yeah.
What did I say? Anyway,
Program.
Problem. We don't have a membership problem. We do not have a membership problem. We have a participation problem.
Correct.
Because if you get these people coming to lodges, whether it be fundraisers or coming to a stated meeting, participation. If we get the participation, then we're going to get the memberships because everybody's going to see, hey, my buddy Ricky, he's a Mason. I'm not a Mason, but he seems to be a part of something that is pretty cool. They're donating, and of course, I always go back to Phoenix Lodge, my crown jewel. I love that place. Our chapter and council has given roughly probably around $12,000 to $15,000 in the last couple of years for all these charities. The Miracle League,
Miracle League was a big one.
The Gold Star families there in Weatherford. We do certain things besides just give scholarships because our lodge gives scholarships. So we want to do something else out in the public. But my friends see that and they say, hey, what are y'all doing there? And then, we got to have participation. If we're to get the membership up where we think we need it to be, we got to have people participating and coming and being a part of it and having a voice.
Yeah, it's like if you're driving by a restaurant and there's 3 cars in the parking lot, you probably ain't going to eat there.
I'm not.
But if there's 50 cars in the parking lot, you're going to be like, hey, I might need to try that out.
Yeah, I'm missing something.
So, yeah, I'm missing something.
Good example. I really feel like we don't have to flood the market with membership. We need I'd rather have 50 good quality guys coming than 100 people that don't know nothing and ain't doing nothing.
No, I mean the perfect way that's represented is we initiated 1,900 guys last year, which isn't great,
Sure.
but still that's a good number, decent. Well, only 800 of them got raised.
Isn't that crazy?
It's less than half, right about half that we raised. So there's just your problem. We've got guys coming in, but can we keep them?
They're knocking on the door, but
Yeah.
there's something.
And they're knocking on the door for a reason.
Absolutely.
They're knocking on the door because they want something different than what they have.
They want to be
And
challenged.
Are we giving it to them?
Half of them don't think so.
Or a lot. Well,
That's a
and
big
it may
gap.
not be if they think so. Are we turning good men away with how we're trying to bring them in?
Yeah. No, well, I mean, if you get in and you're like, okay, I'm a Mason, this is great. What are we going to do? Well, son, we've got a membership problem, and we need you to really help us
Is
with
that
this
not
membership
the
problem.
most depressing thing on the
Yeah,
planet?
you're like all of a
Yeah.
sudden you're a part of this group that you think's awesome, and all the leadership's talking about is how it's broken.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, when you say problem, that means something's broke. There's
Yes.
a problem. We need a solution, and that's when it comes to membership, I agree 100%. We don't have a problem with that. They're coming and joining. But if you look at EA's not progressing and guys that go suspended for non-payment of dues, if we want to identify a problem, there's your problem.
We were on a special committee for Right Worshipful Underwood to look into that, and it's pretty interesting to see all aspects of it's hard to put myself in that situation because I wasn't that person.
Yeah.
I wanted it, and I wanted it all.
Yeah.
I didn't want just to dabble in it and learn and see what it's all about.
You wanted the deep end
I
right
wanted
away.
to know everything there was to know about any of it. I was in.
Well, I think one of the things that we also end up doing is we end up shortchanging a lot of things by
Yes.
we're trying to do everything we can to speed up the process, to reduce the amount of time that it goes from EA to master. We're trying to diminish the amount of time and effort it takes to put in the work for the catechism and such. And one of the kind of the breakthroughs that I had was that the best part of being a Mason for me was not being a Mason, was the part of having to strive and work my backside off to learn the material, so that whenever I became a Master Mason, it was valuable. I had to work my butt off to get it, and so whenever I got to put on that ring, and I got to wear the paraphernalia, and I got to vote in open lodge, it had a meaning. It wasn't just given to me by some, sped up process.
And you made me think of something that kind of sums it all up. Is the culture is today is, I did my proficiency in 2 weeks, which is great if you can do that.
Sure.
But it's not a bragging point, you know what I mean? Like, I did it in 2 weeks. I was an EA for 2 weeks, and then I got passed. And it's like, if you're a savant like that and can memorize it and understand it that quick, great. But if you need 8 months to learn it, you do your thing, you know?
So you know how they always say, if you get the wrong word or say the wrong sentence, somebody's kind of chiming in.
Mm-hmm.
So,
are you talking about during a degree, or
no, whenever you're learning your work. So,
that's another podcast.
I was afraid to ask questions. So it took me like 10 months to do my EA because
10 years.
10 months. So I was afraid I was going to get kicked out. I thought, because they said you have a year.
Yeah.
Well, I wasn't asking any questions. All I know is they said, you got a year. And I was going, dang, I better hurry up or they're going to kick me out. And I didn't want to get kicked out. So I got to about 10 months and it just started clicking for me.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, this is going to happen. And I turned it in, but I was so nervous they were going to kick me out. And then later on I found that wasn't exactly the case.
Yeah, that's another thing, too, to where, technically the EA does have a year before he has to petition to advance. But they don't know. We never, you've got a year. We don't go into the whole process, and then you only have to fill out a little paperwork.
Mm-hmm.
If an EA asks how much time I've got, we need to get in the habit of saying as much time as you need. And then when he gets close to his year, that's when we say, hey, we got a little paperwork you need to fill out.
Yeah, it's not a big deal. You just need to pay $50, and then we vote on this, and you're cool.
And I feel like, even after the guys join the lodge or EA or whatever, we worry a lot about the catechism, and there's a lot more to being a Mason than just the catechism.
Yes,
absolutely.
I got a crazy one for you.
I feel like some guys, they leave because that's what's stressed. I think that we need to teach them how to be leaders.
Yeah.
And the chairs in the lodge, going through them in the positions, teach leadership.
Yep.
Do you feel? I got a question for y'all.
Oh,
Come on.
Turn the tables.
Come on in.
Easy question.
You're just interrupting Ricky. No big deal.
Oh, sorry.
I'm used to it.
It's too late now. Thoughts lost.
What would be your opinion on if an EA and Fellowcraft paid dues, a yearly dues, just like we all do, same fee, at 148 it's $365, and they still paid $365. They came to your meetings. They were open in a Fellowcraft or EA, but they were active and they came. And they said, I just don't want to. I don't want to become a Master Mason or a Fellowcraft Mason. I want to be an EA for 5 years and really, whatever. Do you think it would be different than what we hear today? Is like, we got to get all these guys that are EAs into Master Masons.
I think we would see more appreciation for the process, right? Because we'd say, hey, if you want to be an entered apprentice for 5 years and pay dues to show up just to EA meetings and receive EA education and be able to interact with us only on the level that entered apprentices can interact, so you can't vote,
right?
You can't be on an investigation committee, all this jazz, right? There's a lot of privileges that go with being a Master Mason.
Sure.
But if you want to do that and you're active as an entered apprentice, or that's all you have
paying dues, you got something in the game. Paying dues.
Sure. Right. That's entirely your choice. I think you're losing out on a lot, but if you're paying dues...
Well, I would push back a little bit on that, because are they really missing out on anything?
I don't think they're missing out.
Because if they are really learning the lessons of an entered apprentice, and they are taking the time to really wrap their brains around philosophically what it means to be the entered apprentice lessons,
right.
And it takes them 5 years to wrap their brains around that. I think process-wise right now we're dealing with a problem where the lodges are incentivized to push people through financially, because that's when we start getting dues from them, is when they become a Master Mason.
Right.
And so we've incentivized this process of push, push, push. If we took the incentive away, gave them, like you're suggesting, the dues structure that allows them to...
Because they're members.
They're members. There are certain privileges they don't get to engage in.
Sure.
Then I would say let them mull over the processes of an entered apprentice. Let them be a fellow craft. Because the fellow craft, in my opinion, and I've said this to several people here,
love it.
It is one of the meatier parts of being a Mason.
You miss
but
out.
you pole vault it in the
Yeah,
process
that's a
of
good way to
being
put it, yeah.
a Master Mason. You just you hurdle it because you see you're an EA. You spent so much time being an EA, and then you finally get past, and suddenly it's like, okay, you have this information to learn. It's a little bit easier to learn it, and zip, zip, zip. 2 weeks later, they're getting raised. And I think that is the problem that I think of that structure.
A lot of younger people, they're busy. They got college, jobs, families, things like that. They want to be a member, an EA, fellow craft. They may not have the time to put into it to keep moving forward or up. That you can still move forward. So why not let them be a member and they work at their own pace?
But the aspect we have of it today is you just got initiated and you're sitting in there and they're saying all this stuff and they're like, oh, you've got 1 year to turn in your work, so you got to get that in before. You don't know nothing. But all you know is you got 1 year. So do it.
The thing I have, though, is what is the motivation for the person who wants to do that? Because if they want to do that and they really want to dig into it and find out, the lessons of being an EA.
What if they're just lazy? Maybe they don't. Maybe they don't want to learn it all. They just want to be a Mason.
If they're lazy, then I would have to question myself. But there are some lodges, right? Some heavier lodges that they require their members to wait like a minimum amount of time in between degrees, right? So that way they can learn it. But they have lessons in a curriculum in between. And if you're going to do that, you have to have something like that set up in place. If it's a person who's like, I don't feel like being bothered with it, then it's like, well, maybe
it's
Masonry
like
isn't
going through
really...
the chairs.
But how many Master Masons do we have right now that are dues paying, and they barely show up to lodge?
If at all.
If at all. They don't participate in any kind of rituals. They barely show up to state meetings.
Got a point.
And so is it really that big of a difference to say, let him be an EA, let him pay his dues, let him come in, and even if he is lazy, I'm not here to tell you what your life path should be.
Correct.
That's
I like this guy. Where'd y'all find him?
See, I told you when you got me talking, y'all might regret
and
it.
it's like when you listen to your ritual and stuff, it tells you there was this many Master Masons, there's this many fellow crafts, this many EAs. I can tell you that 365 days later, they didn't make all those guys working on King Solomon's Temple EA Masters. I think that everybody's path is different. I'm a big proponent on that when you join, even if you're an EA or fellow craft, you should be paying dues. And
I agree.
And you take your
path,
you got to take your path however it brings you. Like I was telling you, I didn't even think I was 14 years into this before I ever decided to be an officer in the lodge, because that wasn't my path, and whenever I started doing it, it was the right time.
Yep.
Maybe being an EA for this long is your right time, and whenever your time for the next one comes, then your life will dictate how that works.
And it's just, I think it's the structural things that, I think a lot of American Freemasonry has it. I think every jurisdiction, I could be wrong about that. There's probably some out there that aren't like that. But Texas, for sure, is definitely structured so that it's about pushing people from EA to Master Mason in as expeditious time as possible. Because, I don't mean, of course, this is just reductionary in that it's bringing it down to the most fundamental non-Masonic idea, our motive behind it. I don't think there's a single lodge out there that's motivated by getting money from a candidate. I've heard Billy say it, we don't want your money, we want your participation.
Yes. Yeah.
But the structure, if I were an outsider looking at the way that Freemasonry is structured right now in Texas, the push is to get people to pay dues, and the only way you get people to pay dues is if they're Master Masons.
Yeah.
So if you restructure it, I think that you get a lot of benefits because as much as people like to crap on millennials, I don't think that millennials, in as far as Freemasonry is concerned, are driven by the entitlement culture. I think that there's probably a culture coming up in these younger generations, millennial and the whatever they're calling the generation after
Gen
them.
Z.
Gen whatever.
Yeah.
That'll
Also
change.
known as Zoomers.
Okay.
What a sad name. That's me just crapping on them. But
well, and to a certain extent, this is a very Ameri-centric discussion, right? Because if you look at outside of the United States, exactly what we're talking about, where you start paying dues as an entered apprentice, that's the norm.
Really?
You start paying dues when you're an EA because it takes longer. It takes longer. You know, I have a relative who is in Latin America right now, and he joined a lodge down there, and he's an entered apprentice. And I said, okay, so how long are you? What's the path like to being a Master Mason? And he says, well, depending on what my instructors think and how the lodge feels, it'll take me between 3 to 4 years to become a Master Mason, because that's just the path that they have set out, and they're basing it off of your emotional development, your path that you demonstrate to the lodge,
Sure.
and you're expected to take part in what ritual you can take part in. And they say, hey, it's totally okay to say, 2 to 5 years to be a master, just depending on what your lodge, where your lodge thinks that you're ready.
I think it would be totally okay to get rid of degree fees and just say, let's just charge them dues.
Yeah.
Well,
why have degree fees?
I'd be fine with degree fees in addition to dues, because degree fees do cover some of the specifics.
Dues would do the same. I mean,
Right.
but I mean, you could also structure it to where you could have a set dues for EAs and fellow crafts. Because, to be honest, I was not a fan of the $50 fee. Never a fan of EAs paying anything but their degree fees. But hearing this conversation really makes you think that, I understand that we work on incentives, and it is, whether we set it up that way or not, it is incentivizing us to push that program faster.
So if
that's
I'm
not
an EA
good.
paying dues, and I see, okay, I'm getting this for this, well, what am I going to get for this next set?
Yeah.
So it might make me be like, okay, I'm paying dues to be this. Why not keep moving up?
Yeah,
I'm
why
paying
not?
dues
If I'm going to
anyway.
pay dues, I want to be able to vote. They're going to change these dues on me, because that's the thing. We could go up in dues and they got no say on it, but they're going to pay.
Right.
Well, it also kind of changes where the direction is coming from. That instead of it being the motive is for the lodge to push people through, it becomes the motive is the
Of the
individual. The
There you
candidate
go.
is
Put it
being.
as
It's an incentive for
So I'll be
them.
looking for a resolution next year from one of y'all.
Well, and that's one of the things. And I was actually,
we
I
want it to
remember
pass.
when that
We'll have a chance to
resolution,
it.
when the resolution to charge them a fee to advance came up, I remember sitting next
Yeah.
to Rhit in Grand Lodge, and I was
Making it
poking
too
him in the
complicated,
side, and
man.
I said,
Come
Rhit,
on.
you've got to go down there, because I'm not a past master. I can't speak at Grand Lodge. But I wanted him to run down there and amend the movement to say that the lodge can set its own fee.
When he becomes a past master, we're never getting him off the stage.
It's going to be terrible,
It'll
y'all.
be like,
So
like
going back actually to the conversation though about the membership, right? And we have this drive to do membership, and that's why you even see some states that have like 1-day Masons, right? They go in that and they start in as an EA that morning, and they come out that afternoon as a Master Mason.
Or as a Shriner, even. They do.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
So I don't think the drive really has ever been about money. I think it's always been about recapturing a past glory.
Yeah.
Right? That we had millions of members, and that's what everyone is focused on.
I get it.
We used to be so huge, and in the past 60 years, we've seen year after year after year of loss.
We used to have all the city council members and the mayors, but hey,
Yeah,
we
I
still
agree.
need Earl working down at the Jiffy Lube to be just as active as the mayor of the city.
Yep.
in our law.
Absolutely.
Yep.
So I think the problem really is a loss of focus, as opposed to maybe some kind of monetary game.
No,
game that
we
we're
have
looking at.
become really focused on that membership number because we've gauged our success so long on
Right.
where are we at as members, to where at our peak, we had over 250,000 in Texas, but Masonry today may be better than it was then with 70,000. It has
Right.
the possibility to do, but we're so hung up on the numbers that we're missing the forest for the trees.
Well, I think in the 1830s and 40s, we became a nation and a state,
Right.
and I think there was about 360 Masons in the whole state of Texas.
Yeah, there wasn't many.
So, and we accomplished a lot.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And
That's
most
a
of
good
them were
point.
in, Sam Houston, Bowie, Travis, all those guys.
Yeah.
Governors and heads of colleges,
Yeah.
R.E. Baylor and all those guys. And they accomplished a lot. And they didn't have 260-something thousand people.
Yeah.
So,
It's a lot to consider.
Well, and also when you read about some of the Masonic writings that are coming from those eras, they were complaining about the exact same thing we're sitting around here complaining about right now.
It's
like
every era.
membership's going to hell in a handbasket.
I read
Membership's
old
bad, and
emails.
people don't know the work, and
Those-
Masons are lazy.
That damn new greatest generation, whatever they're calling it.
I tell you, and I say this to a lot of people that I talk to. I read a lot of old proceedings, especially chapter and council. And 1984 is the best proceedings for the Grand Council ever. I think.
1984.
E. Frank Smith was Grand Master of the Grand Council, and his message in State of the Order, he says, "We have uninformed members informing members about things they are not informed on." And I thought, holy cow!
I feel that in
Is
my
this
soul.
2019? But I'm like, this is 1984. I was 5. And I'm like, holy cow, this guy's reading my mail. We have the same issue in Masonry in Texas. How many? I mean, we all know we have uninformed brothers informing brothers, but they have nothing to be informed on. They don't know what the hell they're
How
talking
many
about.
times have you heard, "You can't do that, it's against Grand Lodge law," and then you look it up and you're like, "What are you talking about?"
What I always say is, show me.
Yeah.
And then it's like, well, look.
Crickets.
Let me. Oh, I got to find it later when I get home.
What article is that? What do you mean article? What are you
Those
talking
are
about,
always-
articles?
Oh, I think it was a Grand Master's decision way back when. Oh, go away. Leave me alone.
Let me go find that book.
I got those too. Show me.
And there's this weird perception that if it's not explicitly outlined in the Grand Lodge Constitution, then it's not permitted. When you go to the Grand Lodge training, it's the exact opposite. They're like, unless it is explicitly forbidden,
Right.
you can do it.
I like to deal in facts. Don't tell me your opinion on it.
Yeah.
I can do my own opinion. Yeah, I deal in facts. You either have it on order or you don't.
The only jurisdiction, or at least the only American jurisdiction that I'm aware of where the rule is the opposite, so our rule is if it's not prohibited, you can do it.
Right.
The only American jurisdiction that I'm aware of where that is not true and where it is only permitted if it is explicitly permitted is the Grand Lodge of Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Because that is actually one of the statements in their they call it something else. It's not a it's something, but their law book.
Right. Well, they do.
States if it's not permitted, then it's not permitted.
Yeah, they do a lot of things differently. Great brothers, right?
Yeah, and we're not knocking them. It's just that's the only example that comes to mind. So-
Usually when you say you're not knocking them, you're knocking them.
yeah, but no, I'm just
Especially
bringing them up.
Gabriel.
as an
Beep,
example.
beep. Did you just hear that bus go by? I think Pennsylvania got dumped under it.
I learned this past week about Pennsylvania is they don't do the past master's degree there because when the chapter broke away, the Grand Lodge kept the past master's degree.
Right.
It's
right.
called the
Yeah.
installed
So-
master's degree. Yeah,
Yeah.
It's
So it was
it's
pretty
cool.
interesting.
What else you got? Give me a good
Yeah.
question here.
So we talked about what
We've
the
been
biggest
through three.
weakness is. What's the biggest strength? What do you
The
guys
biggest
think is the
strength-
biggest strength of Texas Freemasonry?
The biggest strength in Texas Freemasonry is what we got up here.
The people,
This is
the
it.
relationships.
These are people. I've been on tons of investigation committees. I've never been on one. And I asked the candidate, say, what makes you want to join the Masons? And he says, I don't want to learn questions and answers. I don't want to learn that memory
I love
work.
memorizing stuff.
I've never heard any candidate tell me that to my face. Now, if anybody in the
Such a
state of
great
Texas
point.
that's listening to this has had a candidate tell them that at their house,
Call in
please
right now.
call.
Chance's phone number,
Because
he's answering
I've
the
got-
phone
let's
give
for
everybody
us.
Gabe's phone number real quick.
Ricky has a unicorn running around over here.
It's
My
a
phone
donkey.
number is 979.
Yeah, we got some ocean
But,
front.
.. I
Is-
ain't telling y'all that.
And Right and Worshipful Reese Harrison said it at South Central Conference last year when he got up there in front of all the other Grand Masters of the Grand Councils, and he goes, "It's about us. When's the last time you went to the movies with your friends or that are Masons and their wives? When's the last time you all went out to eat and so forth? You know, people see people like us out and about, whatever we're doing, and." That's why. I mean, I don't go to lodge just to sit around and eat fried chicken and green beans.
Yeah.
I do it because of people like y'all.
No, absolutely. I have more memories. I have some memories of some degrees that were phenomenal.
Sure.
Don't get me wrong. But I have more memories of leadership trainings, forum and exam, where you're just cutting up with guys
Yeah.
and brothers on the sideline. And that's what it's all about. I mean, some of my favorite memories are being locked up in a car, driving to Corpus with
Yeah.
Billy, and, you know, just really getting to know somebody.
Riding in a car with Sam Gibbons.
Easy.
There you are,
Oh,
Sam. I had to
geez.
say your name on here.
Hey, I'll tell you.
He'll test you. He won't listen to this.
I call it parking lot masonry.
Yeah.
Yep.
You get out in that parking lot after lodge is over, and you'll have discussions. I was at Azel Lodge one time, and I visited there, and I sat in a parking lot with about 5 or 6 guys, and we're talking about stuff that, you know, they're like, I didn't even know about that, you know, about the
Yeah.
old charges and stuff, and things that we're not teaching because we're too busy thinking we're teaching the right thing.
Yeah.
When there's other things that men want to learn. And parking lot masonry, I think, is a big thing. Whether it takes place down at Papa Do's or in the parking lot, you know, if you're with your friends, that's what the world's about, because we're all here for a short time, and whenever it comes our time, you know, it's the relationships we made that are going to make a difference.
Another big thing we do is, of course, the charity. I mean, that's a big thing. I'm all into the charity. There's so many.
A lot of them.
Yeah, there's so many pros for Masonry, especially right now. Back when I joined in 2000, you know, there's just so. I'm sure there was things active that were huge, but not right. Like right now, there's just so many things going on. Look at on a Saturday. You pick any Saturday, there's something going on Masonically in your area. I don't care where you're at.
Yep.
You can't plan nothing and
Right.
not over. But you got a great point, you know, because I think about my mentor and, you know, special moments learning the questions and answers, but there were times in between to where he would just give me some little piece of advice about being a man, and he wasn't meaning to do it. He'd just say something and change my life. And I can think of several instances of things he said. It wouldn't have happened if we wouldn't have just been hanging out.
Exactly.
You know,
Or
and-
going on a trip. Yeah.
Yep.
Those are good. Good.
When you put
memories.
it in perspective like that, it really kind of makes us. It really kind of puts it into perspective for me, at least. The stuff we just talked about the you know the challenges we have as Freemasons in the state of Texas. It really puts it like on a scale.
Sure.
That the good stuff is ridiculously outweighing the bad
Oh,
stuff.
yeah.
But we sit around as Freemasons and we, you know, complain about the
Dress
membership
code.
dress. Let's open that can of
How
worms.
many of y'all got a collared shirt on? I do. Gabe does.
I gotta leave, guys. I'm not gonna get all
Chance has his V-neck on. So.
He is wearing flip flops though.
With his hot tan.
So,
What else you got? for us?
but the important thing, by the way, of that though, is you got to be active to get those moments.
That's it.
Yeah. Because
Right.
if you're not hanging out with the guys, you're not
Participation.
gonna.
Just like SpongeBob.
There's gonna be some boring,
Participation.
be some boring hard moments, but it pays off when you
And the
get a little
bad thing
master's
is-
wages.
Is if you don't make somebody feel like they belong at your lodge, and they go home and they're watching whatever they like on TV, then the next month, they might decide to keep watching what's on TV instead of coming back.
Been there.
And after a while, it becomes a habit.
Yeah.
You
And
gotta
then,
give them some value.
and even
Whether it's
my brother, he told me, I said, hey, he hadn't been to lodge in forever. The guy that raised him was a guy named Tom Land, past Grand Master of Texas. That was his boss. And he told me, he goes, I don't know if I can get in the lodge. I don't know. He don't remember any of the stuff.
Yeah.
And I said, dude, you can get in there. But, a lot of guys are embarrassed because of the way that people make them feel.
Yeah.
We need to be welcoming people.
Sure.
And making them feel like, hey, we're friends. We're all together. We're one.
Yeah.
And,
We're all brothers.
and companions and stuff. And it's one of those things where if a guy gets in the habit of staying at home, then it's going to be harder for him to come back to lodge.
Way harder. Habits are hard to break.
Yeah.
No.
Give us a good one, Gabe.
Well, so this is going into more of the specifics now. So y'all are both pretty active on social media. Ricky definitely is very active on social media. How do you guys feel or have used social media to build excitement in Masonry?
Ooh. That's Ricky, 100%.
I don't know anything about it. I'm glad to see that you got the right council symbol on your shirt there, Gabe. Yeah.
Is that how we're starting the social
That's
media
how we're
discussion?
starting this off. I'm a big fan of social media. I was pretty shy as a kid when I was growing up, and I whenever I got on social media, that's how I met my wife. Whenever I was in junior high and stuff, I was a stalker, and in junior high and stuff, and it came our 20-year reunion. I was on there, and she was on our page, and
something about Mary is
I
what this sounds
contacted her, and we started dating. And
I didn't know you were here.
I'm trying to figure out when you're talking, I'm pretty quiet.
I'm sorry.
So,
That's funny.
but whenever it came time to start my company, I used social media. It was free, and when you're starting a company, you ain't got a lot. And it exploded, all due to social media, because that's the way people communicate today. Most people don't do the newspaper. The phone book, people don't read the phone book. It's all social media. People are asking their friends.
Right.
They're getting references and stuff. So I put up a social media page and ran my company like that, and it just exploded. And why not? It should work for a lodge. So we use it for, we started the lodges on social media, and the younger generation, anywhere from 18 to 40, they're on there, and they're looking, and they're Googling, and they're hitting it, saying, hey, what about Freemasonry? Tell me about Freemasonry. How do I join? What do I got to do? We did the Grand Commandery Facebook page, social media part, and linked it to Twitter and Instagram and stuff, and we'll get, I'm not kidding you, 30,000 hits on there. And it's phenomenal, and it's all free. And if you're running your lodge like you'd run a business, because that's all we did, it was hard at first, and I got friends with me, Billy and guys like that came on, and they said, hey, we'll help you, which made it a lot easier because people were sending us stuff. Hey, can you do our page? Can you do this page? And because they saw the outcomes of the pages that we were running, and social media was a big excitement for lodges, and it increases that and membership go hand in hand. So,
But you got to be active.
yeah, you got to be active. You can't
That
just
seems to be the
put
running theme of
put
this.
if you put a page up
And you don't do anything.
and you haven't posted on there in 18 months,
Oh, yeah.
it's got to be an everyday thing because of algorithm and things like that. Hopefully that's the right word.
Yep.
And
You don't sound that word.
no, I cannot.
You conveyed the
I don't think
concept.
That's
I
a
can
Jim
spell
Rumsey
it.
word.
It is. I don't think I can
Now
spell
calling
it either.
Right Worshipful Brothers, Dr. Jim Rumsey.
Don't ask me to spell it.
As he calls in right
He's
now.
calling
Doctor,
in.
as he'll point out.
Yeah,
Doctor.
Right Worshipful Brother,
Rumsey.
Dr. Jim Rumsey. Yeah.
Hell of a
Tell
good
us
guy.
how to
Please
say this
call
word.
Chance Chapman, and he will screen your call. But
Can I ask
today,
a follow-up question to that real quick?
today, if your lodge isn't on social media or your organization, whether it's your business or whatever it is, if it's not on social media, you're missing out.
There got to be a way to find you.
Your
So how
follow-up
did-
question?
Yeah, I wanted to say, because there's I think that I hear a lot about acceptable limits about what lodges and organizations in Masonry post on social media. What are your personal feelings about where lodges and Masonic organizations? What are the wide boundaries for building social media, but doing it in a way that is I don't know, appropriate?
So-
Are there any inappropriate outside the fold?
The biggest issue I see sometimes with our fraternity is people think that if you put a square and compass up, you're telling the secrets. As long as you're not giving away the catechism and what's going on in the degrees, the grips, the tokens, the words, modes of recognition. Because you know what? And it's not that they're secret; they're private. Because you don't want to ruin it for the next guy when he goes through the initiatic process.
Absolutely.
That stuff doesn't belong on social media. Anything else belongs on social media. I'll tell you one thing. Y'all did a podcast a couple of years ago, and Rhit said, you know what I like about Ricky Cox?
Uh-oh.
And I didn't know Rhit very well at all. He said, he doesn't come and tell you should join something. He's on social media showing you why you should join it.
Yeah.
And that's what social media is for. Getting people excited and showing them. I get on there with my Ric Flair robe, and sometimes I act stupid. Just funny as can
I've
be.
seen that one.
Because I don't, you know
only
what?
sometimes.
If you're laughing at me, I'm doing my job because you're having a good time.
Really take advantage of that FOMO.
People, yes.
Get
People
them
don't
fearing
laugh
of missing
enough.
out.
And if you're having a good time and laughing, you're going to want to come and be a part of this. So
tell us about hashtag TXRCP.
What?
When they did that, it was a part of the whole boot thing. It was right before the boots came out from DP and them, and I would post pictures of, and the boots I posted pictures of came from Teskey's. They're old Twisted X work boots, and I'd post pictures of my apron and my boots because they were a lot better looking than my face. So I was like, nobody wants to see this mug. So I'd post pictures of those work boots while I was at Lodge, and it was just something to do because nobody knew you were at Lodge. If you didn't post anything, nobody had a clue. Well, if people see you're somewhere, they're going to be like, oh, I should have went there, or I should go there next time. And it just gave everybody a chance to participate in being at Lodge and being a part of it.
Do you remember that time we went to a shrine event, Mazda Shrine, and Route Worshipful Underwood was there, and his lovely wife Rebecca, and it was me, Ricky, and Paul and Rebecca, and we were sitting at a table, and Ricky's boot post had come out, and these girls it was a drinking thing or event at the shrine, and they sat down. She goes, I know you.
Yep.
You're the one with the boots.
With the boots.
And I'm like, you don't know. That's how she went. Ricky didn't know her from nothing.
And we're at the
but some random
we're at
person.
family day at TMRC, and I'm standing there, and this lady behind me, she looks down, and she turns around, and she goes, I know those boots. And just because she had saw them.
Right.
And all it is a mode of recognition of, hey, they associate these boots with Freemasonry.
Yep.
And just like the square and compass or whatever. And so people want to be a part of it. Well, they allow everybody to be a part of something. And you don't have to be the master at a lodge or the past master or anything. You can be just the regular member at the lodge, enjoying what's going on, post a picture of your boots, and be part of something bigger than you are. Because everybody wants to be part of something.
It's a perfect example of how things can catch on. I mean, if a picture of boots can catch on, by God, I mean, anything can. You just get creative. Yeah. And I thought it was perfect just because, of course, you can't take pictures in open lodge.
Right.
When lodge is open, of course, no pictures then. But, while lodge is getting open, it was a great way to say, I'm here, do you know what's going on here? You know,
Where
because
are
you just
you
get a
at?
shot of the floor and the boots, and it's like, these boots brought me here. Where are you?
There's a lot of lodge pictures taken. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
different
All
throughout
over
the
the
state.
world.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
pretty cool.
I mean,
No, if you-
we had people in Scotland.
Scotland.
Taking,
You need to
Google-
start doing that. again.
Google
I'll never
hashtag
forget-
TXRCP, and there
Yeah.
are thousands of pictures.
I'll never forget this one pair of Twisted X boots that you wore, and they were the most hideous boots
Hideous.
I've ever seen in my
Yeah,
life.
I
And
agree.
they were
My friends in
yellow
Georgia
and
wouldn't allow
red,
me.
and it looked like you were wearing McDonald's Happy Meals on your feet. It was so hideous.
The story behind that is because I wore all kinds of boots, and I had those Peruka boots that I got from
Those
DP.
fire
And,
engine red looking things.
And then
those?
he brought some
But they
boots.
had yellow on them.
Yes.
They
Yeah,
looked like
they were
McDonald's
fish.
Happy
I
Meals.
thought I was
They were the
McDonald's.
fish boots.
He says,
yeah,
"Hey,
the pure cuckoo.
I got a pair of boots for you.
Special.
I want you to wear them." And he brought them to lodge, and they looked like somebody put mustard and ketchup on top of them.
Fancy sauce.
They were orange.
Fancy sauce.
So I tucked my boots in. I took my pants in my boots, and I was sitting in the West, and
That's right.
I wore them just because, you know,
That's right.
because it made the atmosphere of the lodge a little funner.
Right.
Funner's not a word, but a little more fun.
How do you spell
It's
that?
a Rickyism.
So,
We're not spelling
and,
things here
and that's
tonight.
what we need. We need things that
A
you
run
know,
off.
You don't gotta.
RUNNOFD.
That's it. We need things in lodge that are a little different to get guys to relax and say, "Hey, this is enjoyable. This is all right."
We
Yeah.
watched Old Brother Wartell the other night, and my kids said, "What is that? Run off? RUNNOFT?"
That's a great movie. I think that's a great point, though, Ricky. I mean, because, you know, lodge is very serious. But you got to remember, you got that EA sitting over there that the last thing he heard is you got a year, and he's at month 9, and he's thinking, I'm fixing to get kicked out.
It's a fraternity.
Yeah.
It's a fraternity.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
In a fraternity, you should be having a good time.
There's shenanigans now and again. Absolutely. There should be.
You know, and there's business parts to it, but there's also, it's got to be fun.
Yep.
And if being silly makes it fun for everybody to where they want to come back.
If I'm
Yeah.
not having a good time, I'm not coming back.
No.
Exactly.
guarantee.
I've got a million better things to do than attend
Yeah.
a meeting that I don't want to be at.
You tend to go to lodges, chapters, councils, commanderies, Scottish Rite, meetings, grottos, shrine, that you have a good time at.
And I didn't
Because
like
it's
the,
worth your time.
I didn't like the TXRCP hashtag thing at first. And I didn't even understand the hashtag thing at first.
You thought it said pound.
I was like, yeah, I thought it was pound. And I was like, what the heck? And whenever I learned what it was, it may not seem like it, but I'm a little humble. And I didn't like my name being associated with it just because that's just not me. I thought he could come up with a better hashtag, and it was a guy from y'all's lodge. I
Yep.
thought he could come up with
One of
something
our
better
past
than
masters,
that.
yes.
But it kicked
What
off.
up, Greg?
And then I was like, whenever it kicked off, I was like, you know what? If this draws people to our fraternity and makes them feel like they're a part of this, and it's getting people from Scotland and all over the country
Yeah.
to participate, then why not? You know?
That was one of our first conversations when you
Yes.
came up to me and asked me, what is this TXRCP
I had
thing?
no clue.
That's so funny. He didn't even know.
I was like, pound.
Dude, I remember Greg calling me and being like, we need a hashtag for this.
So
It
you
is.
guys have been in the fraternity for a while. How, from you guys getting involved in the fraternity to now, what would you say are the changes that you personally have seen as an individual Mason?
Okay. Well, individual Mason.
Touchy changes.
You know, and I used to be, because I was all ritual, 100% in it, everything. And I always thought that if a guy didn't know the ritual as good as I did, or really know it that good, then it was a little bit, you know, he was a Mason, but he wasn't
Yeah, wasn't up to snuff.
up to snuff. Yeah, that's a good word right there. And I had a great conversation with a very, very dear, good, close friend of mine. And he drives a white Volkswagen.
TDI turbo diesel.
Drives a white Volkswagen, and he and I have been all over a lot of places.
There's a lot of miles on
Yeah.
that.
A lot of
Volkswagen.
miles
Yeah.
together, and we had a conversation one night in his car as we were driving down between all the trash and toothpicks in there. Rhett's
You
laughing.
could build
'cause
a wood log cabin.
we Lincoln Logs in
Yeah,
there.
you could.
And he says, we were talking, this discussion that you brought up, Gabe, came up, and I said, man, it's the ritual. I really think it is. And he says, well, what makes a ritualist more of a Mason, per se, than a guy who doesn't know any of the ritual, but can raise $25,000 for
In
scholarships
a day.
when the ritualist can't or doesn't?
Yeah.
And a light bulb went off, and I thought, damn, he's right. He's exactly right. We need the ritualist. We need the guys raising $25,000 in one day at an event. We need the guys cleaning the lodge. We need every aspect of that lodge, and we're all on the level. That's
Yep.
And that was I guess you could say, come to Jesus for me, because and if it wasn't, I probably as he says, we probably wouldn't have ever met.
Right.
He wouldn't have been a Mason, and I have completely changed my outlook on that. And most of you know me. I'll listen to all avenues, sides of it, and then I'll make my own decision. I'm not. This is the way it is, and this because this is my way. I'm not that person. And Sam is a really, really good friend of mine, and I talk to him almost every day. And he would do. He and Ricky would be the guy I'd call if I was broke down, because I know Sam would come faster. Because that Volkswagen gets better fuel mileage.
I'd have to get dressed.
And Ricky's like, well, I got some things to go do first. I'm on my way. Give me an hour and a half and I'll leave. But Sam Givens does more for Masonry than a lot of Masons that
Damn
I've
near
known.
most Masons, yeah.
Than I've known in 20 years.
Just don't ask him to stay longer than an hour for a
And
meeting.
if your meeting's longer than an hour, he's out.
He
And
gone.
I've seen it. I've been part of it because I've rode with him.
He'll tell you before the meeting starts.
He'll
Is this going to go over an hour?
He'll look at his watch and say, he's got 10 minutes.
And Sam is not a ritualist, but you know what? The thing, like DP was saying, Masonry. When Sam got in Masonry, and it's something you guys said, like DP said, on the level. When Sam got in Masonry, he's not a ritualist, but Masonry lifted him to that level that we all stand on.
Yeah.
The level isn't meant to be where you step down to. Sam stepped up and met us on the level from a better man than what he was, and started changing people's lives the way he changes people's lives.
And he does a hell of a good job, and I commend him.
I am absolutely going to steal that line and consider it stolen, because that is like my one aha moment of the night. The whole the level isn't something you step down to, but it's something
These guys
every
came
Mason
up with
has
it
to
in
step
one of their
into.
podcasts.
It's stolen. I'm sorry.
Copyright plagiarized.
Right.
The
Y'all need to
work.
trademark that right there,
So
because
I
that is
actually,
some brilliant
and I
stuff.
actually can't because it's from a 33rd out of Utah. But I created.
What is it with all these bright people saying smart things? And
We can still make a T-shirt out of it.
No, and I actually created
Can you make a pair of boots like that?
like an Instagram
Step
post
up.
style
We can
graphic
put that
for
up.
that. The
Yeah.
exact phrasing is the level is not something you stand on, but something to strive for. So yeah,
That's some brilliant stuff there.
it's one of my favorite concepts. We're all lifted up to that level, and Sam's a great example of that. As long as you're aiming for it, you become a better person.
I had similar epiphany with Sam. I was the same way.
Because Rhett, you and I are
I
a
was
lot
the
alike.
same. Yeah, I was the same way.
It's because
A
both
lot
of
of
y'all are nerds. You're ritual
Well, we
nerds.
came up in that time that
Yes.
that was the only thing I had to prove my worth as a Mason. I was nobody before my A certificate. Although I knew the work before I got the certificate, and I was helping in degrees. But once I got that certificate,
it was the culture that you
I tell-
quote unquote grew up in.
I tell people all the time, I say, me knowing the work, or a person knowing the work, doesn't make you a Mason, but it gets you get respect.
It was night and day.
It's living the work and understanding the work
That makes you a Mason.
Yeah.
So, follow-up question to that one. So, as individuals, what the changes you've seen, what are the changes, since you've gotten in, that you've seen in the craft?
Is he trying to get us kicked out?
So, how has masonry changed since you've gotten involved? Now,
Well, Gabe, you got to remember, when I was master in 03,
You had to walk up a hill both ways.
when I was master,
it was in Lubbock, Texas, and there was a cold storm blowing in. No, I went to Grand Lodge in 03, and on the resolution book was, do we close the Masonic Home and School? I was master of a lodge, and I was 24 years old, and that was the resolution. And I rode there to Grand Lodge with a past master of McKenzie, Ray Copeland, who was master of lodge when I joined McKenzie.
Great guy.
Awesome guy. One of the best men I know. And we drove down there, and as we all do when you go to Grand Lodge, you pull out the old resolution book if you're with somebody, and you're like, all right.
and then you argue.
Resolution number 1, let's hear it, boy. Let's hear
Yes
you
or
got
no? That's it. Yeah.
And that resolution got brought up, and I was like, of course, I was a punk kid.
Yeah.
But I was master of my lodge, and I said, we need to close that thing, do away with it. And he says, what if we got rid of all the people that are in charge of it and put other people in charge of it and made it a better deal? And I thought, damn, he's right.
Yeah.
Of course, things happen for a reason, as they say, but that was the big thing when I was a master in 03, going to vote on that.
Yeah.
That was a big thing
That's
in Texas.
the biggest thing in the last half century.
Oh, yeah.
No doubt.
And to be a part of it and be there for all the discussions. It was a
And carry
big
3
deal.
votes on that, yeah.
Yeah, it was a lot of pressure then. I was just a punk
It was a
kid.
big staple in
I was just an
Texas.
old ritualist guy.
And for any of our listeners that are not familiar with it, the Masonic Home and School was, basically an orphan's home. It was
1899 to 2003.
1899 to
Yep.
2003?
Yep.
So just over 100 years. And, I mean, it was a safe place for kids that didn't have anywhere else to go.
Yeah.
And
It was a great thing, and I wish we still had it. But
We don't.
water under the bridge.
Yep.
Let's go on. What was your other question?
just, yeah, what are the changes you've seen in Masonry since
Okay,
getting
I
involved?
never thought we would see the age change to 18.
Yeah.
Never thought that would happen. And I'll never forget it because I thought it was a hell of a good idea when Right Worshipful Miller made a Grand Master's recommendation that affected the EAs and fellow crafts and doing something
Yeah.
with all these members that we have sitting out here. And as I was going around the state that year and traveling with Sam mostly and Ricky and everybody, they'd say, what do I think about it? And I said, well, it's a hell of a good idea. If you've got one, I want to hear it. I'm open to ideas, but and that just failed, but it was a hell of an idea.
It was.
And
And what was it specifically about getting entered apprentices and fellow-crafts involved?
we'd have to go back to
It was a day
In
pass.
the ride.
it was
If you were an EA, been investigated and everything, then and you passed your year, then they would come in and do your fellowcraft and masters in a day. But
was
you
a-
had to be already been investigated as an EA.
and buy an endowment. I forgot, or there was
No endowment.
no
You paid a
endowment,
fee
okay.
for it that would go back to the lodges. Yeah.
But whenever that was argued at Grand Lodge, I never heard anybody else come up with an idea to do anything about it. It's kind of like my dad said, if you don't like the way somebody's doing something, do it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And I commend Right Worshipful Miller for that. It was at least it was an idea.
But that's not the way we've done it before.
Yeah, I'm not super keen on that idea because it reminds me too much of the one-day classes and
So
So,
on
Gabe,
your
I want to
one-day
ask
class,
you, what's your idea? No, I'm joking.
no, I mean,
That's another discussion.
my idea is not do that with them.
So we just contact the 6,000 EAs and fellow craft sitting out there and say, hey, where the hell have you been for 20 years?
Actually,
Why
yes.
don't you come on back? Give us your money. Give us your $50. And come back and we'll teach you what we forgot to teach you.
We'll get you raised real quick.
Yeah. Well, and I think
actually, and it's not automatic, so it's like, give me your $50 and we'll think about it.
Yeah. Well, I think it kind of goes, though, to one of the things that we don't ask people is, hey, what were you looking for that you didn't get? Because we lose track of these guys, and something happens where we say, hey, you left. Clearly, you petitioned, you got your EA, there was something you were looking for,
right,
and you didn't find it.
Yeah.
You don't have to come back. But what were you looking for?
Like an exit interview.
Yeah, like an exit interview.
Yeah, those are
So-
always filled out. If anybody's ever been in that position where they have to fill that form out to get their last check,
Yeah.
Yeah.
sucks.
None.
1. It's horrible. Yeah.
So in your opinion, if a guy doesn't go through the normal way, then he will not make a good Mason.
No, absolutely not. I think there are...
Because you said about the one-day class, and I know guys in Texas that have went through pretty quickly, and y'all know some of these guys, but y'all wouldn't know if they went through quickly or not.
I'm not saying that at all.
Extremely active.
I'm not saying that at all. I think there is no distinction between Masons and one-day Masons. That's not a distinction that exists. Even just from statistics-wise, in states where they do one-day classes, they have the same level of retention for guys that went through the one-day, that went through the traditional method. I think there's no such thing as a one-day Mason.
Sure.
There is a Mason who got his degrees in one day, right? Like, it would be a bad thing to put the focus on one day as opposed to Mason. He's a brother, and that's great.
Like John Wayne.
Yeah, in Arizona, yeah, they did it one day.
MacArthur too.
Yeah.
But
You mean the people we
biggest
paint
thing
murals
is-
on?
Yes.
the biggest thing it goes
They
back
weren't out
to
there.
is being able to develop those mentor-mentee relationships.
Oh, I get it.
And
I get
going through the traditional degree process gives you the chance and opportunity and the time to develop those
All right.
really important
I
relationships.
got a question for Gabe then. And Billy.
We're
Oh,
asking
hell, I'll
questions
just ask
now.
all of you.
All right.
I've heard a couple of times, in my Masonic travels, that some people have said, maybe Texas should omit on the decision of the lodge the second and third section of the EA to advance. Would that bring in more, less? What?
That wouldn't change anything.
I don't think it would have an impact.
No.
You don't think it would?
No, because the guys that are getting involved, the guys that are petitioning the lodge don't know what's involved in the entered apprentice, so it wouldn't change or.
Yeah, I think what he's asking is, would it change of guys going through?
Oh,
It would
you're talking about throughput?
speed the process up for the guys that are going, but the guys that aren't going to go wouldn't. To me, I feel like we're so close on the cusp of having the instructors we need to teach these candidates, because that's where we're at now. We're trying to make this shorter, not to get candidates in and make their journey more pleasable. We're trying to make it easier on us. That's the whole reason we've changed the way we can open EA and Fellowcraft lodges now. We've shortened our lectures. That's because we didn't want to do that part.
So why did they make it longer back in 1921?
1921 when they cut, because the way the proceedings read is that they were there from the beginning. The second and third section was there, but nobody was doing it.
Well, we didn't even have the catechism from 36 to like the 1950s.
This
didn't
is
turn
a
in
good
any work.
Jim Rumsey
1850, sorry.
Yeah, 1850.
Yeah.
There was no law that required it. They were there. but there were lodges that weren't doing it. I mean, you talk about you would go from East to West Texas, you're going to get 2 totally different rituals.
And you're still going to get that today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Jim gave a great presentation where he was talking about how and I cannot remember what year this was, but I think it was in the 1800s, and he was talking about the Committee on Work and the development of standardized ritual and the development of when we went from district lecturers to having Committee on Work members that taught this stuff to eventually having district instructors that assisted the Committee on Work.
Sure.
And this Grand Master goes out and visits a lodge in, I think, El Paso.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
he goes and he talks about this lodge, and he says, well, that it was very good ritual, but that he wasn't sure that it was Texas ritual.
Yeah, he knew it wasn't Texas ritual.
Yeah.
But, I mean, that was that was Texas, but, I mean, they were disconnected from us because it was 10 days buggy trip.
In his talk that he gave at MasonicCon, he said that essentially your ritual was whatever the grand lecturer exemplified for that year. So he could change radically from one year to the next.
Hard to believe.
Yeah.
Well, I think to kind of get back a little bit to the question that we started with before we meandered a little bit.
What was that?
How has Mason...
About the section
Where are we?
specifically.
Oh, okay. That's a...
What lodge did you join? Is that
I rewind way too much. Second and third section. Let's talk about
I think that when it comes to the second and third section, like to Gabe's point, nobody coming in is going to know what we're going to be doing second and third section. But I think that the more we push for shorter and shorter and shorter catechisms, learning processes, whatever you want to call it, the more that we are shortchanging people of the experience of being a Mason. And I realize that there's a lot of people who disagree with me with that. You know, leave your comments below on the Facebook page, whatever. I don't care.
Don't at me.
Don't at me. But the point here is, I think that the problem, if we're going to boil it down, we're talking about membership numbers, and we're trying to find ways to like massage numbers so that it makes it more palatable, and to make it shorter or faster, or to get more people through the program, however you want to say it. But at the end of the day, I don't think anybody who we talk to about being a Mason is ever going to say, I joined Freemasonry so I could have an easy way from point A to point Z.
Are they going to say I joined Freemasonry to repeat words back to a guy?
But that's not the process.
That's
not why they're joining, of course.
No,
Right.
Nobody
and they
is.
better not be
Because our
just
question's
repeating
the same.
words.
Our
Yeah.
question's the same.
Exactly. What I'm
Okay.
saying here, though,
And-
is that I
and-
think by removing
So-
obstacles
and
and
you're
making it faster,
So you're talking about the second and third section of the EA.
sure.
So are there other sections in the Fellowcraft and the Masters?
No.
Well, no.
Yeah,
so
but-
there's no other sections. There's only one section in the Fellowcraft, one section in the Master's
Absolutely.
degree.
Absolutely.
I think
Are you sure?
this is interesting. I think
I'm not talking about the catechism. I'm talking about the work.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
the
yeah.
work. Yeah.
So,
yeah. Okay, I
so
gotcha,
why don't
I
we
gotcha.
do the second section in the Fellowcraft or the Masters if we're doing all the sections in the
Well,
EA?
I'll say both
I can absolutely sure. Let's add more. I'm
I was
like,
gonna say,
let's
if you're
add
adding,
more.
add more.
If you're adding, that's
talking
great.
to a ritualist here.
You're talking to somebody who wants more and
Yeah.
who thinks like Gabe was talking about, dive into the deep end of the pool.
Yeah.
But what I'm saying here is that I think that for the sake of making things faster, easier, going through the system, making it more palatable, that when we start shaving things away, we're not doing anything besides hurting our membership numbers.
So do you think that hurting the membership numbers also comes from from only teaching the catechism and not teaching lodge leadership?
Yes.
Oh, absolutely.
Because that doesn't happen at all.
Yeah.
Oh,
You'll
absolutely.
have a guy go through all the chairs and he gets up to the east and he's still...
Yeah.
Still has no idea where he's
And
at.
that's the
Right.
thing, is that's become the checkpoint. You finish your catechism, check, you can be a Fellowcraft. That may not mean he's ready to be passed or raised, just because he can turn his proficiency.
I don't think people are walking away because of the catechism
Yeah,
or
they're
how
not.
many sections
Exactly.
are in
That's
there.
my
It's
point.
when they open that door to Masonry, what did they find behind it?
Yeah.
And was it something that interested them or not?
Yeah.
And was it
it was
only an
KFC
emphasis
and
on
not
catechism?
Popeyes.
It's the feathers on your chapeau.
And I think that also one of the things that we're losing sight of is when we ask, hey, did we ever have anybody that joined because they wanted to learn questions and answers? Nobody does that. It's just understood that the questions and answers are a process of advancing Masonry. That's not why people join. It's not why people don't join.
Sure.
It's just understood that, hey, there's a process to becoming a Master Mason, and this is just part of the process. And as far as sections 2 and 3 go, I see real value to them because section 2 explains the initiation. You don't need section 2 for a fellow crafter, for a Master Mason, because section 2 explains the entered apprentice ritual to the candidate, the reasoning behind movements, the reasoning behind things that he is asked to do, right? It explains the ritual portion. So section 1 recounts the ritual, section 2 explains the ritual, and then section 3, which is unique to the entered apprentice degree as well, you don't need it for the fellow craft, you don't need it for the Master Mason. Section 3 explains how lodges run, how lodge should ideally look like, and why the lodge functions the way it does.
And then after we do all that, we tell them they got 1 year.
Yeah.
What else you got?
I would even say that we should have a second and third section for
ideally
for
maybe with more
fellow craft and
advanced
master.
Yeah.
But that's another subject for another day.
Yeah, I mean, the way I look at those sections, by the way, for myself, the way I explain it to my own son when we go through it is, number 1, the first section is what happened. The section 2 is why did it happen. Section 3 is background about why we do things the way we do it.
Yeah, and I would say what, why, and how, not for the ritual, but for the lodge.
Right.
3 is how of the lodge. So what of the ritual, why of the ritual, how of the lodge.
Yeah.
So you guys have traveled all over the state, and you've been both very active with craft lodges and the York Rite. And so you, DP, earlier we were talking about this, and one of the questions we have written down is, how many trips would you say that you've taken? And you were totally going, well, hell no, you don't know how many trips you've taken because at this point you lost count. So the questions we'll ask you guys is, what have been the trips that have stood out to you, most to you, and why? Best trip, worst trip, craziest trip.
Oh. Okay.
And you
want to go first, or you want me to? Okay. Best trip ever. And it kind of... I've got 2 crazy trips. Anyways, I got a couple of... Y'all know me pretty good. One of my best trip I ever went on was Ricky, Sam, and myself. Was it the same as you?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, my God. That's crazy. We might be brothers. No, I'm just... We went, it was right after Grand Lodge, and I was just got installed as the Grand Junior Deacon for Mike Wiggins. And Ricky Cox, Sam Gibbons, and myself drive down to San Antonio for the Alamo.
Menger Hotel.
We got a room at the Menger, and we got there, of course, the day before the annual. We used to meet in the Alamo. I don't know some of you kids out here up here on the state, but believe it or not,
I remember dial-up internet.
But believe it or not, us Masons used to meet inside the Alamo every year in December, in a tiled meeting. It was pretty cool, and I'd never been. And so Ricky, Sam, and we drive up there, and the night before we get a room at the Menger. That's Sam's place, and we kind of walk around just talking and looking at things, and it was a hell of a good moment.
Being friends.
Just being friends and Masons. That's what it's about for me. And then the next day, the next evening, we have the Alamo thing. We go inside the Alamo, and it's a tiled meeting. Have y'all ever been in there?
Yeah.
During that event?
No.
Well, look at that. Look at that. Everybody's been in the Alamo, but nobody up here has been in a tiled meeting in the Alamo but myself. Chance?
Yes.
You've done it.
Yeah.
Of course, Chance was actually born in the Alamo.
Probably.
That's how Texan he is.
Yes. But we were in there as a tiled meeting, and it was crazy hot in there. Crazy hot. And it's
Because they don't have air conditioning, by the way.
No, it was...
Oh, yes, I remember during the Texas Revolution when they called Texas Comfort.
Yes.
Texas Total Comfort.
I was looking for a red bike.
It was it was in the basement.
Yes.
Anyways, it was crazy hot in there, and this guy passed out.
Whoa.
Wow.
Mason in the door shut, and this guy passes out in there from the heat, I guess it was. And they call an ambulance, and they get him out there, and he's standing out, he's laying out there on like a gurney thing, out there in front of the Alamo. And we all start, the event's over, and we walk out, and I can see all these people looking around at the Masons wearing aprons, and there's an ambulance. You know, what are they doing in the Alamo? I'm like, golly, that's not. It was pretty funny, but that was. And on the way back, we stopped
At a Mexican restaurant.
there.
Yeah. San Saba.
San Saba. That's another story.
That's
Anyway,
another story.
we stopped in Dripping Springs. They were
Yes.
having a stated meeting, and we stopped there.
Rambo Lodge.
Yes.
Yes.
And that's the night they says, we're having an event at this county fair. We need somebody to come work in work in the what do you call
The
it?
little booth.
The booths where they make they were
Cotton candy.
No.
Potatoes.
potato wedges things.
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Spiral. You seen like at the fair?
Oh, the
Curly
spiral
fries.
cut taters, yeah.
So we're sitting in
Tater
there.
on a stick.
That's the spiral thing.
Curly fries.
And they says, we need some more people to do this, or we're not going to do it. And I'll be damned. Sam Gibbons
like-
says, I'll do it.
I'll be here.
I'm coming back, and
What?
I'll do it. I kid you not. And I looked at him, I said, are you crazy? He says, I ain't got nothing else to do. And I'll be damned. He did it. He came back and worked in
Yes.
that booth and had a hell of a time.
We went to Rainbow Lodge, and we had eaten before we went to this lodge, okay?
Yes.
We ate. We get there. They were so freaking hospitable,
crazy.
and they had food from their garden stuff. So they had
It was
like
awesome.
greens and turnips and all kinds
It
of
was
stuff.
amazing.
Like
And-
real fresh food.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh.
So I'm eating, and I'd already eaten,
Oh, boy.
and my belly was like huge, and I was hurting so bad. And we got in that little bitty car of Sam's, and I was going, I just don't know if we're going to make it all the way back.
And then another crazy trip. We were going to Houston, and I was making myself available that year. And
For Grand Council.
For
Right?
Grand Council, that's correct. And I had put my truck in the shop. I had a Dodge Cummins, and I had put it in the shop and had this lease truck. And I said, damn, Ricky, why don't you drive? And it was, and Ricky's like, okay, so Ricky, how many of y'all have rode with Ricky? He's not just the best driver in the world.
No.
And he doesn't know where in the hell he's going. He doesn't know how to get there. And he can't really see that well when he's driving.
He just goes.
But I didn't know all these things at this point in time. So Ricky's driving, I'm in the passenger seat, we're driving, and there's a semi good. It's kind of far-fetched, but it says 100 yards away, and the tire blows on that truck.
Yes.
Oh,
The
no.
tire on the trailer blows, and it throws the thread out. Most people, common drivers like us, would either straddle it or just lightly turn the wheel to miss it. What does Ricky do?
Run over it, baby.
10 and 2, baby.
No!
10 and 2. Hits that damn truck tire. Boom! On the passenger side front steer tire. I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, I didn't want to jerk. Dude, this thing was 200 yards in front of us.
Took a big hunk out of our
It's
tire.
not like it happened right in front of us, and it was like life or death splits. No, hell no. It was way up there.
We're in a truck.
And he hits that thing, and we stopped to eat in Waco, and I said, I'm going to look at that tire. I kid you not. There was a
Egg.
knot knocked out of the tread of that tire, at least 8 inches wide, and the whole tread was missing. I said, well, I damn sure hope we make it to Houston and back. And Ricky did not drive the rest of the way or the way back.
Oh,
But,
man.
of course, my favorite trip, of course, also would be all the trips to Waco for Grand Lodge and Grand Chapter, Grand Council, School of Instruction, Grand Command. I mean,
Oh yeah.
So
That's great.
that story explains why when we went down the Brownwood Commandery, and it was the three of us, DP was like, "I'll drive."
I don't let Ricky drive. Well, his car doesn't hold more than itself.
Thank
so.
goodness.
What about yours? What would be yours?
You know, I do like the time that we went out of our way and put everything on the line to go try to help out a fellow brother down in Port Neches. We get down there thinking it's only one candidate.
It was a fellow companion.
Yes, companion.
For this meeting.
And when we got there, because this is a York Wright podcast thing that we're doing here.
Yes.
It was a companion. And we get down there.
We were defrauded.
Look at him shake his head.
It was during the weekday. So, you know, we're driving from Weatherford to Port Neches, or whatever they call
As far
it.
south as you can go.
Yes.
Natchez, he says.
And we get down there and we're like, hey, we're here. And we're both working in this degree. And
we had already talked about, hey, we
He's
can
shaking
make
his head
it
so
back.
hard.
yeah, we can make it back.
We can drive
Because
back.
we've never not driven all the way back except this time. And they had 7 candidates.
No, but this particular person, particular companion, Chance, says,
Who may or
hey,
may not be in the same
we got
room.
this degree, come on down. So Ricky does Master Overseer, and I was doing Senior Deacon for this Mark Master degree. And we get there, and may have been a long drive all the way down there, and said, all right, who's the candidate? And all these guys are down there, and they're like, candidate? You mean candidates? I said, well, how many is there? And they said, 7. And I could just look at the clock, and I'm going, okay, 30 minutes, 30 minutes, 30 minutes, 30 minutes. There ain't no way. in
You
hell
were running
we're
at
go-
the time.
I was making myself available. We left Port Neches. It was 11 something. It
Yeah.
was late.
And we,
Chance, what time
Would
was
you
it?
like to defend yourself?
no.
Yes. So first of all,
You're awful tan. Did you
I told y'all ahead of time.
No, this
how
is a
many
DP
times.
and Ricky deal.
Well, when
No
you
side
defame the good
comment.
name of a brother, mate. First of all, I told y'all ahead of time there
Why
were
are you
7.
so tan?
No. No.
God bless me with this skin tone.
You did not. Tom.
I did. Y'all just don't remember it.
Ladies and gentlemen,
Second
this
of
tan is
all,
brought to
we
you
were
today
out-
by Lash and Glow in South Lake, Texas.
Second of all, we were done no later than 9 o'clock.
No.
Yes.
You started
Yes.
at 7:30.
No, we start at 7, and the proper pronunciation is
30
Port Neches, not Neches.
Natchez.
So this
So,
is
It's
so
like
do
naked,
not
not
believe
naked.
everything
All I
that
know
Ricky
is-
Cox and DP Payton tell you. It's not
we,
always 100%
we were so
factual.
tired driving back that it was the only time we couldn't drive back, and we went down
We put our lives
To
in our hands.
Houston.
Oh my
to
god.
visit chapter and council down there, and we made it all the way back.
Yeah.
So
It's-
this is the only time we never made it all the way back. We had to stop at this seedy motel,
It was bad.
and I think they might have charged by the hour. And it was the
Oh,
only
boy.
place that was in Centerville, Texas. And man, it was like 4 o'clock in the morning.
It was bad. It
So-
was shady.
Well,
Like
and
one light out in
Yes.
front of it, and that's it.
We're like,
But there was this old 2-story house in the background, and this window, there was this lady in this rocker. It's kind of weird.
Damn.
So, but I can see your math, right? Because the first section of the Mark Master, if you do it
15.
individually, it's what?
15.
hey,
It's not 15.
maybe the way y'all do
if
it.
you got a
in
good
Fort
senior
Neches,
deacon who knows what he's doing, it's 15 minutes.
I
Let me
was
tell you
gonna say
something.
it's
North
closer to
Texas,
20
we know how to
20
do it.
minutes, yeah, I would say 20.
That's closer to 20. 30 minutes is a little generous, but I would say
7
20
candidates.
20 minutes, right?
Okay, so that's 140 minutes. So that's 2 hours and 20 minutes right there, just for that first section.
Yeah.
So
Glad you're
that's
here,
gotta be
Billy.
at
Yeah,
I'm
good
glad
job,
you
Billy.
are here, Billy.
And we're not counting the time that it takes to grab each candidate and from your
Get
dining
'em
room or
prepared,
wherever,
all that stuff.
so that
Yeah.
you can put them away.
Yeah.
So let's say 20, 25 minutes. 9:30 by the time you're done with section 1.
That
for all
That
7,
sounds reasonable.
right, and then you still have to do section 2 and the lecture and the charge.
Oh, yeah.
And I know they're in a different time zone down there and stuff, but it was pretty rough.
We just did 2, and we started at 6:30.
Yeah.
And we ended around 8:30.
Yeah. So you're saying DP is right?
I don't know if I want to say Don Paul Payton was right ever, but, you know.
All I'm saying is I hear a lot of things.
It's
And
like
some
that
things
old
could be
saying,
right.
there's two sides to every story, and there's the truth is somewhere in between. I think that applies in this situation.
Chance makes it sound like there was not a man on the grassy knoll.
Ted Cruz.
As
Ted Cruz's
we
dad.
all knew, it was Ted Cruz's dad.
We going to Matador was another good trip.
That
Those guys were so appreciative when we came down there. We visited Turkey, and it was just a different atmosphere than being in the Metroplex and stuff. And we had a good time down there. Those guys were real hospitable.
Billy Farley, Wes
Yes.
Campbell, all them guys. Man, I tell you, Masonry's
It's
that's
not
a good place.
It's
up
not just in your hometown. It's actually something that it reaches out to wherever you're at. It's part of it. So we've had a lot of good trips. I can say that myself when Don Paul made himself available for the council, we went a lot of places.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever I made myself available for Grand Commandery line, we got 58 commanderies, and I visited 37.
It's a lot.
A lot. And they're all over. And Billy went with me to a lot of those, and luckily he drove because obviously my drive
still
is
here.
not... we're still here. And then we visited a lot of blue lodges. I would think that we've probably visited well over 300 blue lodges easily in the state. The Sam Gibbons has visited almost every single
Traveling
one.
man.
Yes. So we can't keep up with him, but we've been. It's been a lot of fun, and it's about the people you meet. Because if it wasn't for this organization, we wouldn't have got to go to these places and meet these people. And now we're friends with them forever.
Mm-hmm.
The guys from out there in West Texas, they'll come here, and we've met them for breakfast before.
Yeah.
And it's like you've been friends with them your whole life. So that's the best thing about traveling.
Yeah.
If you're just
I
staying
love
in
seeing
your...
the guys from El Paso at
Yes.
especially at AMD Day.
Mhm.
The brothers from El Paso travel real well.
Yeah.
And it's great. I love
And
it.
I
That's why
believe that Masonry is starting to get a lot of excitement, especially with younger guys, because you see guys from El Paso. Back in the day, El Paso was a strong Masonic area, and now you're seeing these guys come out of El Paso, come out of Hidalgo area, out of the valley and stuff, and they're coming over into Texas, further and deeper into Texas, to meet all of us.
Yeah.
And build those bonds and those friendships and those relationships, and all that does is strengthen Masonry as a whole.
We
When
have
you
a
look at-
candidate coming up from Laredo for the York RITE Festival here in Fort Worth.
Look at Masonry and the Panhandle. Those guys, we're used to traveling.
Yeah.
I mean, I would drive from Lubbock to Kittyquay to go to lodge because I enjoyed the guys up there. I enjoyed that atmosphere. Of course, now we're consolidated with Matador, but I went to lodge in Memphis, Clarendon, Kittyquay, Matador, and we're talking an hour and a half, 2.5 hour drive. But enjoyed it every bit of it. But those guys are used to traveling to go to lodge.
You don't
Not
have a
like
choice.
we are in Tarrant County. You can drive any block and there's a lodge.
You don't have a choice in the Panhandle.
Yeah.
You have to drive.
Yes, sir.
So what lodges and what Masonic events would you say that every Mason, or every Texas Mason or every Mason just in general, should put on their bucket list?
I wish you young kids could have gone inside the Alamo.
I do too, DP.
You whippersnappers, that's what you
I-
millennials, whatever you are.
I am going to wipe my tears away with my avocado
That was
toast.
a very, 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 very cool event.
I'm not going to say we initiated Pee Wee Herman or not, but Y'all weren't there, so y'all wouldn't know. But
It's a secret.
The Alamo was a very cool atmosphere. Very cool. Very neat.
Well, and it's kind of a small building too. How many people can you fit in there?
We had it in there. I mean, it was packed, but it was. You get in there and you say the Pledge of Allegiance, and kind of like at Grand Lodge or Grand Chapter, Grand Council, Grand Commandery, and everybody says, so mo to be at the same time. You're like, whoa,
Yeah.
that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I think everybody needs to go to Grand Lodge too. It's surprising to me how many Masons in the state of Texas have never been to Grand Lodge. And it's not only is it a beautiful edifice, but it's a lot of history there, even hanging on the walls. That was the men who made this fraternity for us. They didn't make it for themselves. They didn't make it for what was happening right then. They put things together for the six of us sitting up here on this balcony out here, and they thought about us, not about themselves. And, it's one of those things where we as Masons, we don't need to do things for Masonry for ourselves. We need to do things for our kids, for our grandchildren, for our great-grandchildren, because that's what was done for us, and the evidence is hanging on the walls there. And I'm shocked at how many Masons have never been there.
And kind of like Reese, go to all the events you can, whatever it is. Goliad, Gonzalez, go to all of them and take it in as much as you're capable to let you and your wife.
Shameless plug. How about Texas Masonicon?
Texas Masonicon,
2020.
yes.
I think something's on the agenda.
Yep.
Go to that for sure. That's going to be that thing gets bigger and bigger and cooler every year. But lodges, the lodge first. If I had to pick a lodge to go visit in the state of Texas, I would recommend Phoenix Lodge number 275.
Little self-promotion.
For sure. That is the number one on the bucket list, but
That's a cool lodge, though.
I like a lot of history in that
Yes,
lodge.
the history.
And being history people, Ricky and I are both big history guys, but I really liked Matador Lodge.
Yes.
I like their lodge room. When you go upstairs, it's on the corner there in downtown Matador, Texas. And it has the ceiling fans up there that hang down from the ceiling. And there was an old story that Right Worshipful Leonard Harvey told me at Grand Chapter, Grand Council, when we were talking about Furman Vinson, who's a past Grand Master. You know who Furman Vinson was?
Yeah.
Okay.
I've read his bio.
Okay. Making sure. From Flomont, Texas, but he was he was Grand Master in 79, I believe. 1979. And he was doing his homecoming there at Matador Lodge and had staffs and going up there. And the guys, of course, Furman was a World War II veteran, Marine, I believe. And the staffs hit the fans and old Furman hit the deck, man. Hit the ground.
Oh, no.
As Leonard Harvey said, he could write a hell of a good book on all the stuff he knew on past Grandmasters. But Matador Lodge, you go up there, they have the cool old square and compass all over the ceiling. Not just one or two, but the whole ceiling. It's a huge lodge room. It's when you walk in there, it's like walking into a lodge in 1924, whatever.
And the crazy thing about that is, like, there are bigger lodges. There are lodges with more people in them. There are probably prettier lodges. But whenever we went there and we installed those guys, it was like one of the most honored things that could be bestowed upon us, because they called us from here. They could have picked anybody they wanted. And we drove out there and we installed those guys, and that was a big honor. And most people don't even know where Matador is. A lot of people wouldn't even think about visiting it, and it was one of those things where you knew you were there for the right reason, and that those guys considered you their brother. And that's really important in this fraternity and in our society.
Go see Phoenix.
So, go see Phoenix.
Go see Matador. Okay,
but I think if you're driving around and you're on vacations and stuff, and you're going through these little towns, because Texas is huge. Look, they got the Amity app and other other things that you can.
You can use the
look
Grand
at.
Lodge thing
Yeah,
now.
the Grand Lodge
Yeah, the
locator.
Grand Lodge locator.
That's
and
very cool.
pull up the town that you're driving through and drive by that lodge and see, because I drove by this little lodge one time and in this little town, and it was Rosebud, Texas. And I'm thinking, who the heck would
Where is
live?
Rosebud?
I'm telling you, let me tell you. And it's the home of LaDainian Tomlinson, played for TCU.
Never heard
and
of
the
him.
Chargers. It's a guy. And so
Okay, I
I
know
drive
him.
by there and I'm looking at this little lodge and I'm thinking, man, this thing's got to be closed down. But it actually isn't. Like, it has a pretty good attendance and everything. So, you just never know. And each town has its own story, and each lodge has its own history. And you don't want, you need to embrace that history because it's yours. Whether you live there or not, you're a Texas Mason. And that history from every little lodge belongs to every one of us. So, and we just need to embrace it, enjoy it.
Absolutely.
So, DP, you're an officer in Grand Council.
You are?
Ricky, you're an officer for the Grand Commandery.
Look outside the door.
What drew you guys? So you're in two different bodies, right? You guys could have chosen the same one. You guys could have chosen different ones.
No,
but you
we
chose
wouldn't have
different
made it
ones. But
together.
what? Yeah, y'all would fight. Y'all would fight too much. What drew you to the grand body that you're serving in? What was it about the grand body that you're serving as a grand officer for that you went, man, I want to serve the state of Texas in that capacity?
Not
maybe
all
a-
at once.
Maybe a better way to
I
put
was
it.
going to let Ricky talk first.
Why did you say this is the one? Not the other ones. This one here.
Well, man, that's a very good question, Billy. And I think the Grand Council, why I'm more towards that side, would probably be because of Jim Manley. I think of Jim Manley a lot. He's, whenever I joined the York Rite in Lubbock in 2003, and I really didn't know anything about the York Rite. I knew the Scottish Rite was on Avenue Q there, but didn't know, we didn't have people like we have in the Metroplex that were like, you're a new Master Mason, here's your petition for chapter, council, commandery, and here's the Scottish Rite. We have a reunion next month, by the way. We didn't have that there. We, and that's probably why I didn't join until 03, the York Rite, but I was raised in 2000, so I knew I wanted to do something. I was master in 03 at the same time. As I joined the York Rite, I decided to go to the York Rite, which used to meet in the old Yellow House building, downtown Lubbock. Huge lodge, very cool. And went in there and moved to Weatherford, kind of got active there, and about that time, Weatherford lost their charter and chapter and council, so we didn't have one. We had a commandery. Weatherford Commandery still had a charter, barely hanging on. But one night after commandery, I think I was junior warden that year, and I told Howard, I said, all the guys that were coming in, we were supposed to get into our commandery, were joining other chapters of council in the Tarrant County because we didn't have one. And the guys, if you join somebody's chapter council, they're like, well, you need to join our commandery.
Yeah.
It's just,
It's a pretty streamlined
it
process.
is.
Yeah.
You need to join Worth or Southside or whatever the case may be. And I told Howard, I said, well, we're going to die. Eventually, we don't have anybody coming in. They're joining their chapter council, their commandery, so we're losing everything. And as I told him, I said, we need to get a chapter and council going. And Howard Hubbard and myself drove down. Orville O'Neill was Grand Master of the Grand Lodge and Grand Secretary Recorder for chapter and council. And we went in his room, in his office in there, and had a good talk. And we had to prove ourselves that, we're not, Grand Chapter Grand Council is not in the business of just giving charters out for the hell of it. You had to prove yourself. And that's what we did. We we're headed back from Waco, and we called a meeting with all the old members of Weatherford Chapter Council. Of course, Weatherford Chapter Council, like I said, lost their charter on our 100th anniversary.
Oh, snap.
Yeah, so there you go for that. Had a called meeting, just an organization meeting up there at Weatherford, and said, guys, here's what we got to do. We got to do this, this, and this, and this. If y'all want it, let's do it. And we had 15 guys said they wanted it. So we started practicing, open and closing, going through that, and proved ourselves. We can for our own degrees. Now we're up to 62 members since 2011. That's pretty impressive. And that kind of really gravitated me towards the council. Plus, you know, a lot of Jim Manley, like I said, is a Masonic hero, I guess you would say, of mine, and always liked Grand Chapter, Grand Council. Of course, it's a different group of people than you have at Grand Lodge, than you have at Grand Chapter, Grand Council, or Grand Commandery. Different kind of groups that hang out after. It always seems Grand Chapter, Grand Council, Grand Commandery is more personal than Grand Lodge. Maybe it's because there's so many more people, but and I love the council ritual, as you well know, Gabe, Billy, Chance, Ricky. You're not New York, right, are you?
I'm not.
Do y'all have a petition? No.
We're working on
But
it.
I love-
It took Rhit 14 years to join the Scottish Rite, so I'm guessing that by the time my
I was
kids
there
graduate
that
high
day.
school,
I was in
I'll
that
be able
degree.
to give him a York Rite.
But I think every Mason has a niche. Whether it be chapter council, commandery, shrine, grotto, you need to find that niche, or if it's just Blue Lodge, that's great. But you need to find that niche, and that'll help keep you more active, involved in all of it. Besides just, like Ricky used to say, I'm watching this TV show, whatever, I'm going to skip tonight, and then the next month's like, well, I didn't go last month, I'll just stay here. Find that niche, whatever it is, and but I'd say the degree work, and then how we fought so hard to get our chapter and council going, and I love the council ritual for sure. So,
Ricky, what was it that drew you to commandery?
So, like I told you, I went through the Blue Lodge, and the first thing he told me is, don't join York Rite. It's not going to be here in 5 years. And it's in 2001. And they pushed me to the Scottish Rite and the Shrine. I went through the Shrine when it was hot, which was a lot of fun. And I just basically did Blue Lodge stuff. And I love the Blue Lodge. Blue Lodge is a lot of fun. A lot of good people doing it. A lot of good people teaching you good lessons that you can use in life. But I just felt like there was more. And whenever we moved to Weatherford, and I got involved at Weatherford in their chapter and council, I was like, okay, this is pretty cool. And I didn't have to turn back the catechism like I did in the Blue Lodge, so it was a little bit more streamlined for me to get through there. And then, but the bad thing was I would call and counsel. I'd be like, hey, I'm working, because it was just me then running my company, and I didn't have guys that worked for me. And I'd call and I'd be like, hey, I can't make it. I'm still working tonight. And now I look back and I feel bad because those guys all were up there waiting for me. So I went through the commandery, and I really liked the chapter and council because it was kind of like Star Wars. You looked back once you got to the, because it's all reversed. And I started understanding what happened to me in the Blue Lodge. And, and I've heard things of people say, oh, all you need to learn in York Rite, you learn in the Blue Lodge. That's not true at all. Everything that you learn in the Blue Lodge, you actually learn what it meant if you go into the chapter and council. And so the Blue Lodge started making more sense to me. And the chapter and council, because there are things in the Blue Lodge that you don't even think about unless you go in the chapter and council, and then you're like, that's why that happened. So it really made me a better Blue Lodge Mason. And then whenever I went into the commandery, Weatherford Commandery had about 47, 49 people in it. And the chapter and council was kicking off, starting to get good. But it was tough. It was really tough, and it was a place where whenever I first went, I was like, oh my goodness. Of course, y'all talk a lot about chamber reflection and stuff in the Commander. We have that. And whenever I was in there, I said, this is what I was looking for. Because it made me think about my life before Masonry, my life during, and my life after this fraternity whenever it's time for me to go somewhere else, whatever your belief may be. And, of course, mine is in heaven and stuff. And whenever I went through there, and I met Weatherford Commandery, and DP's there, he was the commander, and I was looking at everything, and everybody is working hard. And I said, you know what, I can contribute to this. So I started going to the commandery meetings, and we went from 47 people, and we not our 93rd guy in 5 years.
Nice.
We got to 93 Sir Knights, and we started at 47. And so it was like a lot of excitement. And we traveled everywhere, so I met all these great leaders. And a lot of them were in commandery or commandery-related organizations. And whenever you hang out with people that are doing things that are above, like that they're doing everything they can to help an organization or society or whatever, it actually raises you to want to be a better person. And that's one reason we get along so well. We both do things that make the other person want to do better in their respective office. So I was in Abilene, Texas, and we were talking about Grand Commandery, and it needed people running for it, more people that loved it.
Yeah, leadership.
Yeah, leadership and stuff. And so I decided that it was time to run, and I talked with DP and set up a plan. And I had a lot of other mentors, Jack Harper and Robert Laughlin and guys like that. And it was one of those things where it was the direction that I wanted to go in. And the more I learned about it, horses, and of course horses are a big part of our life, and the Christian aspect of it. So it was just where I felt like I needed to be. And so I ended up running for Grand Commandery line, and it was a lot of effort, because you never think, hey, I'm going to run for this and I'm gonna win. You're always thinking you're the guy that's not going to win. And so it was a lot of effort the whole time, and I took a lot of miles, and I'm really glad that I won, of course, as anybody would be. But once you're done, you're like, okay, now what do you do? Because you'll have that high once you get off of that high from making yourself available. And it was very rewarding that in the commandery we have good mentors, that will come in and help you if you want it. So that's one of the things that I liked about the commandery, was the mentorship to make me a better person and a better leader.
So a common thread that I'm seeing here with both of y'all is there were people around you that you saw as mentors or that you were friends with that were involved in that grand body, and then both of you had a constituent body that you worked very hard in or very hard for, and then that springboarded into wanting to serve the state body.
Sure.
That's
I get that.
Interesting common thread.
I have a follow-up question to that. Both of you were talking about that you were involved in grand bodies in some capacity, large, small, however you guys see it. As a process question, I'm kind of fascinated with the idea of, is there anything that you were surprised by that your sphere of influence allowed you to do as a part of that grand body? Or was there anything that you thought that your sphere of influence would allow you to do that you were disappointed that it didn't really pan out? Meaning that, you know, in the grand body, you know, I think a lot of young whippersnappers out there are like, whenever I get in charge, I'm going to do this, and this, and damn it, I'm going to change the world. Is there any of those situations where you were like, yeah, I got an opportunity to change, to be a part of the changes? Or were there any things where you were like, none of that really got to happen because this is how it really works?
I don't know. Well, no, not for me.
DP knew exactly what he was going to run into.
No, as I tell people through, you know, whenever we have this discussion, man, got to get up on that soapbox again. Here we go.
Oh boy. Soapbox.
Masonry in general, whether it be chapter, council, commandery, whatever organization you're in, cannot allow to put people in leadership positions that are not capable of being leaders. Meaning, just because you served as junior deacon, senior deacon, doesn't mean you're going to the south. It doesn't mean you're going to the west, and it doesn't mean you're going to be worshipful master ever. You have a long road to hoe, as they say, to prove yourself to the members of that lodge, out of respect to you and especially that lodge. Continuing to prove yourself. When I say prove yourself, you're coming, you're participating, you're being active, you're working on committees in that lodge that you need to, chapter, council, whatever, and proving yourself that, hey, I can be a leader of this lodge. I can be worshipful master. Because we have, I see it on that Facebook thing all the time, cheap in masonry, you know. We have become okay with mediocre leadership. You know, and I'll just use, this is my example, you know, old Ray, you know, he was appointed junior deacon, now he's senior deacon, and, you know, he doesn't come, he doesn't know anything, he doesn't know any ritual for opening and closing or a degree, but he's a good guy. We need to let him go to the south. No, I do not agree with that statement. That's why we have an election. And the whole atmosphere of where people think the worshipful master appoints who's going to be his replacement in 3 or 4 years is the craziest thing. But a lot of lodges, hey, we have a lineup. This is the line. Well, sometimes, what if a worshipful master appoints a guy to this line that should not be in that line? Mm-hmm. Then your lodge has to suffer for 7 years or 4 years or 3 years with the person in that chair that should not be in that chair for the betterment of that lodge and the membership. People aren't going to come. They're going to get mad and say, this isn't worth coming whenever that person becomes worshipful master. And you have that low year, and then you hope, hey, old Frank's coming in the west. We hope he turns out to be better than Al was, whatever.
So what I'm getting from this, though, is then leaders should understand and know what their sphere of influence is. Right?
And as I tell people, if you voted for me for the Grand Council to be the guy that kicks the can down the road and does the same thing, you wasted your vote. Because I was elected to do something. I'm not up there for an apron and a collar and all this stuff. I'm up there for the betterment of our fraternity, especially the Grand Council. That's my goal, to make that place, to make that organization a lot better than it was whenever if tradition prevails in December and I'm installed. You know, I've got a lot of goals, a lot of plans, been planning for a long time, and got some great ideas. And I hope it shows whenever we're having this discussion this time next year. We'll see.
Power Hour Part 2.
Yeah.
So on my end, as you know, it's a little different due to the fact that my line is 10 years that I'm in. 10 years. And people go, why are you in a line for 10 years? I got to do something for 10 years. Why not do something I like?
Yeah.
You know, I'm going to be here anyway. I'm going to be in it. the organization needs people running it. They, obviously, a decent amount of them think that I will make a good leader. I didn't join the commandery to go through a 10-year line to just wait to do something as Grand Commander. I didn't join the Grand Commandery line to just be the Grand Commander one day. I joined the Grand Commandery line to be the best darn Grand Sentinel in the state of Texas, because I'm the only one. You know, and next year, if tradition prevails, I'll be the best dang Grand Warder. And each position has its own set of influences, whether from Sentinel all the way to Grand Commander. It has its own set of influences instead of just sitting there waiting in the line till they give you that jewel and make you the Grand Commander of Texas. There needs to be things happening way before you ever get there, because if not, there's a reason for these other positions. And those positions are, you know, you have influence on people. You need to be out there. You need to be making the Grand Commandery, you know, like Coke. You know, they get out there and they push their product. This is your product. Whether it's the Grand Council, the Grand Commandery, the Lodge, whatever, it's a product. And your job is to promote it. And especially if you're a Grand Officer, whether you're the Sentinel or whether you're the Grand Commander or anywhere in between, you have the same job: to promote this organization, to make it better, to build excitement so that people say, I want to be a part of that. Your job's not just to sit there and wait till you're the head guy, because they elected you for a reason. They didn't elect you just to be the Grand Commander in 10 years. They elected you because they wanted you to start making a difference right now and influencing people and making this fraternity a better place that will draw outside influence to make people say, what is that all about? Let me be a part of that. And you can influence people, whether you're the EA in the Blue Lodge, whether you're the High Priest, even a commander in a commandery, or even the Sentinel in a regular commandery. You should be doing the same exact thing. It's just your touch. The amount of people you touch is going to be different. You know, in your local organization, you're only going to touch a certain amount of people no matter where you're at. But whether you're the commander or the worshipful master or the Sentinel or the Tyler, you still have the same job to promote that organization. Y'all, like me and Billy talked before, everybody in a company is customer service, you know, because you're the company.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing with these organizations. Everybody has a duty to promote this organization that'll make other men say, I want to be a part of that. And your influence just changes as you go from your local to your state level. You have a broader influence. The problem is we need to not just ride through the chairs. We need to get out there and say, hey, this is my job. I'm elected to do this. You know, I'm actually elected to stand outside the door at Grand Commandery, but there's more to it than that. There's a lot more to it. You know, you need to be out there and be the biggest cheerleader for your organization possible. And part of that is going to not just commandery events, but Blue Lodge and chapter and council, and also civic events. We do a lot of things for local schools. We present the flag ceremonies. We go and give speeches on Veterans Day, and we have the parade. And you got to get out there in your communities and let them see, so that they say, who are they? What are they doing? Let them see your influence that you're having on society and the change in yourself. And that's how it's worked with me anyway, is I have a broader touch due to the fact that I've been elected to a state level line. I'm able to touch more people. So that's where that ends up at.
Damn. That's a long way around the barn.
Hey, look, pot calling the kettle black right there. My goodness.
Yeah.
It just wasn't about him. That's what it was.
I was gonna say, that's short for compared to a DP answer there.
So right now, they're, you're 2 years in, you're 1 year in, right? So you guys are still fresh off the trail, right, from campaigning.
Yes.
Which we don't campaign in Masonry, but I mean
Right.
you made yourself available and you traveled. So right now, listening to this podcast, there are Sir Knights, companions, and even brothers thinking about making themselves available for a grand body of their choosing, right? We all know somebody who's expressed interest,
Sure.
or we know somebody who, we all look at somebody and go, man, I think that guy would be an amazing Grand Master of the Grand Lodge if he made himself available for it.
Sure.
What advice do you guys have for brothers, companions, Sir Knights
All right.
that are thinking about
Can I
making
go
themselves
first on
available?
Yes.
I got a simple one. Think of if you're going to run.
It's gonna be good, huh?
Everybody's leaning
Think of
forward
how
for this. If you
much-
could be in the room right now.
And Ralph Worshful Underwood set a precedent on this thing. I mean, he went and went and went and did an amazing job. He did an awesome job that I don't know anybody could ever match. But think of how much it's going to cost you to travel around the state of Texas and see the people that you need to see. And think of how much it's going to cost you. And whether it's 5, 10, 20, 30,000, and double it. Because it's not going to be what you think it is. Especially if you travel. If you travel and get out and do what you're supposed to do. Whenever I decided to make myself available, I went out and got a credit card. I don't have one, and I got one, and I said, I'm going to put everything on this. And it was, it was more than what I thought it was going to be. I'll tell you that. And
He called me and he said, "This is what I want to do. Let's put a plan together."
I did.
And
that's true.
and it was like, because it's not just going to happen. You've got to have a plan. You've got to know.
You gotta talk to people. You've got to have. And Ricky is 100% correct. You got to be talking to people. You got to have an idea of how you're going to tackle this, because Texas is a huge state. And what I did was travel during the week, stay to meetings, go to a meeting, and turn around and come back. The only time we spent the night was when Chance lied to us. We got stuck down there at the Bates Motel outside of a truck stop that I feared for my life.
Are any of those 7 companions still active?
Most of them.
They
Because
better
of
be.
us.
They better be. But
Come back down.
it is a huge, huge commitment. And it's not to be taken lightly that you say, I think I'd like to run for Grand Lodge or Grand Chapter, Grand Council, Grand Commandery. It is a huge endeavor. More than what you could ever think of whenever you make that decision. You need to talk to your wife.
Yes.
For sure. Your family, because you're going to spend a lot of time out traveling and on the road. And you got to remember, we are an unpaid volunteer organization. So you don't get any, there's no
Reimbursement.
nothing. Just, but you have that burn to serve the companions or the Masons or the Sir Knights is what you want to do, and you make adjustments to where you can make it work. But whatever number you got in your mind, whether it be 5,000 on the low end or 10,000, 20,000, double it. I guarantee you, because it's going to be a lot of traveling, a lot of time. It's going to be stressful, and you got to think, just stay running out on the road, tearing it up.
And the biggest thing is, like, I called my wife whenever I was in the discussion about this, and that was what I asked her. I said, "Hey, this is where it's going. Is this okay? Because she's got to be on board.
Yeah.
And it can't, your wife can't be on board because she wants you to be something else. She just got to be there to support you, and you've got to be doing it for the companions, the Sir Knights of Texas. Your payment is whenever you go to these places and you've touched their lives by helping them. Whether it's going to Port Neches and bringing in 7 guys, or going to San Antonio and doing a Bible lecture that people will send you messages about because it touched them so much, that's your payment. It isn't monetary by any means. It's all about the relationship and the bonds that we build together.
Yeah, we talk a lot about master's wages, and that's it right there, Master's wages are negative fiscally and very positive emotionally.
What's the best question you have on there, Gabe?
What's the best question I have?
Best question.
Think of
the best question. How about Billy?
Yeah, Billy
You're
is
too
pretty
quiet,
quiet.
Billy Hamilton. You talk
He
a lot.
always
This
is.
guy's
on
I
a
was
the
going to
genius,
say,
though.
we're not going to know what the best question is until we hear the answer.
The guy who
So
has
we
the
gotta
same
ask all
haircut
of
as
them.
me.
Go ahead, Billy.
Go ahead, Billy.
Billy Jack, let's hear it.
So actually, the question I have isn't even on this list, right? It's when you're talking about your planning, right?
Like it.
Planning to run.
We're gonna
So
call in from
you get
Texas.
elected.
Keep it down.
So what about your planning at that point? Is your planning over with?
When? I'm sorry. Say that one more time.
No, after you're elected, right?
Okay.
So what
No.
happens to your planning? Right? I mean, because you made this plan, you traveled all over the
And
state.
everybody's come out to you and says, "What would you do if you're elected?"
Right. So, and at this point, though, you're elected to office, so you have X number of years until you have your session, whatever that may be, Grand Assembly,
Right.
So what would you say the time and effort that goes into your planning once you get that office?
Okay. Well, a little different. Of course, Ricky's got 10 years to pick his hotel, go in debt, and
Yeah, he has more expenses.
more expenses. Myself, as soon as I got elected, I was super pumped up, ready to go, get involved, get everything going, and started planning right then. And still planning to today is August the 31st. As most of you know up here, we're constantly tweaking and
for 52 minutes.
fine tuning. What the plan is for the Grand Council for 2020. So you started as soon as I got elected. I started planning for sure.
It's the same with me. It's 10 years, but you've got to know before you go in of, hey, what direction do I want this to go?
Right.
Because if you don't have if you don't see a direction that you want to go, you shouldn't be running. Because if you don't see any kind of direction, there's no need for you to run because you're not going to do anything.
I think Ricky's biggest planning is where he has a grand conclave, if it should be on a single story, so he can carry his oxygen around in 10 years.
I'll still be in my prime. Let me tell you that. I'll still be in my prime. So
But there may be some out there who think, well, once you're elected to the Grand Line, well, that's it, right? You just wait until you're in the Grand
that
East.
is a lie. If anybody has ever told you that is a lie.
It happens,
It also seems like there's a lot of, from what I'm hearing, that there's a lot of, the fun stuff people think about, the really, not so much the prestigious part, but the fun stuff that makes grand bodies seem desirable to be a part of it. And that's they have this idea of what that is, but they also don't think about what the things you're talking about, the expenses that go into it, the planning, the preparation, the leadership skills that you have to have, the things that are necessary that are not fun. And it seems like that there's a lot of that you guys are focusing in on right now that I'm hearing, that are essential.
People see the machine, but not the gears.
Exactly. It's
Right,
the iceberg thing. There's a lot above the water, but so much below it that you don't see that goes into that.
Because if you're getting in this due to the machine just so that somebody can call you by something else, and you've heard it said before, the best thing that I get called is y'all's friend. You know, me being the Grand Sentinel, him being the Deputy Grand Master of the Council, and you know, those things, those are just titles. They're not who anybody is. If that's what you're here for, then you're. It's not the right reason, because you know you're going to get those phone calls, those emails. People aren't going to like you. Not everybody's going to like you. Okay,
Everybody voted for you.
They're not going to like the decisions that you make. They're not going to like it because you might not get back with them in a timely manner. You know, in my case, my chapeau might be too big, you know, or my boots might be the wrong color, that kind of thing. But, you know, it's one of those things where you've got to be like, okay, I want to do this because I'm a servant leader, because I want to give back to something that's bigger than me. Not because I want a title or because I want Rhit to call me the Grand Poobah or something, or Fred Flintstone. You know, it's got to be for the fact that I want to do something for this organization that is going to not just help the people in it now, but help people, future generations. Where you read about people like he knows, like Jimmy Wilson and Furman Vincent and those guys changed Masonry. Those guys made men want to join. And you've got to be one of those kind of leaders, one of those kind of men that inspires people to be better than what they are. And if you're not, it's okay. But you shouldn't be trying to get a title.
Yeah, it sounds like everything that I'm hearing, the advice is, most of what you guys are saying is take a really good, hard look in the mirror, talk with your family, and make sure that this is really what you want. You have the skill set to do it before you start trying to go down that road.
Essentially, check yourself before you wreck yourself.
Well, I never want to discourage anybody, but if you're gonna do it, you need to be doing it for what's best for the fraternity, not just what's best for you.
When I made myself available for the council, I had 3 sons. I have Wyatt, Dylan, Jackson. I coach baseball. I coach football. My oldest son, I'm one of the coaches on a select team also. And like I said, I coach my middle son baseball. I work a full-time job. And masonry all the time. You know, it's 3 times a week. You know, that's a lot.
Or more.
That's a lot. This week could have been 4, but I had some other previous commitments. You know, my youngest son had surgery. Everything's good. But it's pretty interesting when I go to a lodge meeting and everybody says, "How's your son doing?" And of course, my wife is on Facebook all the time. Social media about our youngest son, Thomas. And I'll be sitting in a meeting and they says, "How is your son doing?" And the guy from across the lodge goes, "He's up to 7 pounds, 3 ounces." And I said, "Okay." And then this other guy says, "He did this for the first time today." You know, but you ought to read the comments, and it's amazing. The Masons that comment on the stuff for my son. It's pretty, it's amazing. You just need to look at it.
And the best thing about that is it's not just, you know, one facet of just his son. You know, Masons are very caring people. They are. It's a brotherhood, like we know. But like today, Cutter, my son, he's down in Stephen F. Austin, and one of the guys down there sent me a message today saying, "Hey, I went and met your son today, and he ran for the Grand South a few years ago, and he sent me a message saying, 'Hey, I went and met your son today. I had a great conversation with him. He's a very good young man and stuff.' And he goes, I gave him my number if he needs anything. You know, Russell Brown, he said, if he needs anything, have him, you know, I told him he could call me because he's down there with him, or we're several hours away. And that's how Masons are. They care about your family, not just you. So,
like you said, if you're going to run for a position, make sure you can fulfill your duties. If you get elected, and the time restraints that's going to be included in them.
So as grand officers, you have duties, responsibilities, tasks to carry out. What's something that surprised you about the duties, responsibilities, required tasks when you became an officer, that you jumped into this chair, and you both of you had, I'd say from personally knowing you, both of you had a pretty good idea of what would be expected of you as a grand officer. What's something that you didn't expect that kind of surprised you?
Didn't expect.
Yeah, something you had to do or that was expected of you to perform that you went, oh, crap, I didn't know how to do.
I can say I'm lucky enough that I hang out with a lot of guys that have done what I'm going through, and not just in Texas but in other states that I talk to on a regular basis that have whispered good counsel in my ear, and I would have to say that I haven't done anything, and I haven't been in the job for very long, but I haven't done anything that I did not expect. Just because I had those guys saying, this could happen, this may happen, this is what I did.
And to sum it up, if you don't know what you're getting into, you need to plan it out and figure it out before you get that involved into it, for sure.
Right. Again, going back to that leadership, sphere of influence kind of thing. If you don't know what your sphere of influence is going to be, then don't get involved. What is something about your respective grand bodies that you feel that you can personally improve or change? Something that you say, hey, there's this thing about the Grand Commandery, there's this thing about the Grand Council that I know that I specifically can change. And even if it wasn't as a Grand Officer. But, something that now as a Grand Officer you have more influence and ability to change.
You just sit back and wait. I mean, it's going to be here before you know it.
Spoilers, right?
A couple of months. My goal is to give the councils the tools to be more active.
Yes.
And more participation. Like I said in the very beginning of this thing, 2-3 hours ago, whatever it was.
3 hours
to
ago.
be more, to have more participation, and that's what it's all about, man. And we're going to help. Hopefully, the goal is to give those tools to accomplish that. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be a great ride, and I hope everybody enjoys it.
On my end, a lot of people don't even realize what the Grand Commandery is. A lot of people don't realize what York RITE is, and for me, being in this position, what I would like to do is to promote it better so that people know what it is, they understand what it is, what it's about, and to inspire people to want to be a Sir Knight. Because if you've never taken the Order of the Temple, let me tell you something. It's something that's going to touch you. So...
I was telling somebody this morning that he's waiting on his Order of the Temple. I think he's actually going to be the exemplar candidate for his commandery's inspection. And he and I were talking about it this morning. And I said, what I tell people is that the Order of the Temple is everything I ever thought that a Masonic degree could or ever would be.
Well, I tell people this. In 1941, Robert Bruce Brannan, who went on to become the Grand Master of Texas, had the Order of the Temple conferred on him. 12 hours later, he addressed the Grand Lodge of Texas. And he was a minister. And he told them, he said, less than 12 hours ago, I found the capstone that tops the pyramid of Masonry, talking about being going through the Order of the Temple. That says a lot, especially coming from a minister.
Yeah. So, who would you consider mentors when it comes to Grand Officership?
Grand Officer in Grand Lodge, Grand Chapter, Grand Council, what?
People that so you're serving right now, right? who are people that you look to or have looked to in the past that go, these people inform my behavior, decisions, and actions as a Grand Officer now? Like, I look to these people for advice.
Advice. Who I look for? Well,
There's a lot.
man, where do you start?
The hard part is there's tons, and a lot of, they're all on the same level, and with you being on, this goes live, and then you're kind of like there where, I tell my boy, I say, whenever you're giving a speech,
Thank everybody.
you never mention names at all. You just,
I thought the question was past grands.
Nah.
Like who, because past grand officers can give you advice like you have no idea. Like, you don't want to do this, you need to do this, or you don't do this.
Yeah. I tried that. Don't do it.
Yeah. Yes.
next question.
Next question.
That's
I don't
fine.
want to get either of you guys in trouble.
Let me follow up to that real quick, if you don't mind.
Sure.
What was, if you had like a piece of succinct advice that one of these people gave you, what was one of the best pieces of advice that they gave you? And I'm not talking about the stuff like, don't do this when you're running, or don't do that when you're in office. I mean, like, just general, like, pieces of information that, like, really changed your perspective on Freemasonry or your role in Freemasonry, or
Okay. Yeah. Don't piss everybody off.
Yeah. So I end up in situations where I may be in a room
That's true.
where there are guys that are in organizations that are very prominent leaders. And whether it's in a room with guys that are department commanders, in the Grand Encampment, in the Grand Commandery, and one piece of advice I always get on my phone from a friend of mine that's a past Grand Commander of Texas, my phone will go off, it'll say, don't say anything stupid. That's probably the best advice that I get.
I think I know who that
So, yes. And he's always looking out for me, though. Like, that may sound silly advice, but he's one of those guys that he's always looking out for you. And whenever I got elected, I'd never seen him cry before. Whenever he came up to give me a hug, he turned around, and 3 guys did that. And it was Jack Harper, Robert Laughlin, and Rick Jernigan. All 3 of them had a hard time. They're probably because they were shocked that I won, but
Knowing Rick, I'm just sure he was upset you won.
That was probably Robert Laughlin gives me that advice all the time. He just don't say anything stupid.
Robert's a great guy.
Hard advice to follow,
He's the
though.
guy that whenever
Right.
I'm driving down the road and I'm coming back from somewhere, and if I'm by myself and it's midnight and I'm having a hard time staying awake and I still have a few hours to drive, it'll be him calling me on the phone to make sure that I'm okay, that I'm not falling asleep. And him and Jack Harper have both done that.
Yep.
And they'll talk to me till I get home. And it'll be 2, 3 o'clock in the morning because they've been there and they want to make sure that I was okay. So, because it's hard when you're traveling and you're traveling alone, that's the hardest part. I've been very blessed to have guys travel with me. So, but those times that I did travel by myself, I was lucky that I have people that care about me, that have been there to call me on the phone, and they don't have to. They can go to bed, and they didn't because they care.
So we've talked about some good advice that you guys have gotten, some good mentorship that y'all have gotten. You don't name any names. What's the worst advice you've ever gotten about grand officership?
Can you turn this recording thing off?
No, that's the entire point, DP. The worst advice.
piece of advice. You drive to Port Neches for 1 degree. One candidate. How about that? That's the
You
worst
can't do
advice
that
I
to
ever
him.
got.
He's not here
I know,
anymore.
Chance left, so.
With his
He went to
tan.
bed. He's asleep.
He's all tan and stuff now.
I don't think anybody's ever really given me a bad piece of advice that, like, I would, and you know me, like, no. No, nobody's really given me any advice, and if maybe they have, and I just went one ear and out the other.
Yep.
You know?
That's pretty much it. It just goes in one ear and out
It's
the
like,
other.
oh, yeah, and just keep going.
So I know that you said Casey would be listening for this one. How do you properly manage work, family, and Freemasonry? How do you balance those?
Well, here recently, as it gets closer to December, installation.
Dun, dun, dun,
yeah,
dun, 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 dun.
my days of Mason, my time it's crazy how involved it is with, especially the Grand Council and Masonry, being on Rower Swanwood's planning team.
Yeah.
Rhit, you know all about that.
Yeah, busy.
Your time is, it's not just a evening event. It's a lot. And it gets, Billy, y'all all know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
Up here, it's crazy how much time it consists of, and I'm, especially when I'm off work, I'm on my phone all the time. My kids are out there swimming at the house. I'm up there, on my phone talking to somebody about something, whatever it may be.
Emails,
text messages. Like this week, Monday, I went and gave a fellowcraft lecture for White Settlement Lodge. Tuesday, we did a Royal Arts degree in Weatherford. Wednesday, my son had surgery. Thursday, I could have gone and gave the EA lecture at Phoenix, but I thought it would be very wise to stay home that night. And so my friend Stan, member of Phoenix, past master, did the lecture there. Friday, went to a first Brock football game, and Saturday worked. Of course, I worked all those days too. But I try to where it's not at least 3 days in a row. That's a lot. But if I have to, I do. But I try not to, because that's a lot of time right there between, your wife, family, your kids, your job, your Masonry too. Because believe it or not, I actually like being around my family.
No, really?
Hell of an idea.
Fascinating concept.
And I like spending time with my wife and my kids. I mean, they're in my family. Mm-hmm. Every morning I wake up in the morning. I take my oldest son to football practice, and my mom lives on some land next to mine, and I go over there and drink coffee every morning. And we talk, as my mom would say, if you got something bad to say about somebody, come sit next to me. That's my mom. And we get along very well. But it's hard. It is really, really hard. It's this time of year. In the spring, it's right after Grand Lodge. Everybody's ready to do stuff. Everybody's been to Grand Lodge. Degree work, ideas, committees. And then it kind of goes through. Then you have your conference season. It's like, okay. And then you come into August, September, October, and it's like boom, 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 something going on all the time. Then we have Grand Chapter, Grand Council, April, Grand Commandery, Grand Lodge of January. But I try to, but I don't have a schedule like I can only stay out 2 days this month. I go where I need to be, and my wife understands, and I tell you what, she puts up with a hell of a lot more than I would. Mm-hmm. That's a fact. I mean, helping raise 4 kids, I mean, it's tough. But we make it work, and here we are.
It's in the same, I told y'all before, I got a very understanding wife, very long cable toe. She'll say stuff every once in a while. She'll be like, remember when we first met, you didn't go anywhere, and now you go everywhere. Luckily, she's one of those people she's very secure with herself. Because if she wasn't, it would be hard. So, I'm got to make sure that I do extra things. Take her coffee every morning. Every morning, I take her coffee.
I'm gonna grab my pen and paper.
So, you know, and send, you know, you got to send those little texts and stuff to let her know that, hey, you appreciate her. Hey, so just do little things. You know, you got to do little things. If I'm here at the house, which I am most of the time, she's at the vet clinic, whatever, I make sure that if she's coming home, she's not coming home to a dirty house, or the laundry's not done, stuff like that, so that I'm able, it frees her up and I'm able to go do what I want to do, which is my hobby, you know, because if not, she'd probably get pretty mad pretty quick if she had to do all the house stuff, do her job, and I'm out gone all the time with this guy.
Yeah.
So,
I think that's one of the most common threads, though, with guys that are successful in Masonry, that they have a lot of commitments, or they're serving in grand bodies. Having an understanding family, specifically having an understanding wife. That it just seems like if you don't have a spouse that is on board with this, it's a complete, total non-starter.
It's not going to be good.
You know? What makes Weatherford special Masonically? You guys are active as hell in the Weatherford Masonic bodies. What makes Weatherford special?
I think Weatherford, and I think it starts with the history of Phoenix Lodge. Weatherford has that mentality, especially Phoenix. You know, you don't like the... some people have tried to come in there for years and years and years, you know, come in and da-da-da, and try to tell us how to do certain things. And we just basically say, we do it our way. You know, it's that Old West mentality.
I think, you know, Weatherford, it's just fun. It's a friendly town. It's known for cutting horses and West and Indians, because in our history, in our minutes, talks about the guys getting raided by Indians and stuff on their way to lodge and everything. We've had some great guys that just took over the town. I was told one time that Weatherford Commandery was only there so that guys from Worth could go, Worth Commandery, because it was huge, could go to Weatherford and become past commander. Well, as I researched this, I found out that that might have happened twice or three times, but it wasn't until the 2000s. That back in the day, when Weatherford Commandery was started, it was started in 1909, and whenever it moved through in the 20s, there was almost 400 people in that commandery in Weatherford, Texas, and it wasn't like guys were coming from Fort Worth on their horse to
Model
just to
Ts.
be just to be in the commandery. You know, I personally wouldn't have done it, and you know, so Weatherford has a rich history with its lodge and its appendant bodies, and I think what makes it so special is because it's out away from the Metroplex, where, as y'all know, a lot of big things happen in the Metroplex. Y'all are part of Worth Commandery and Worth Lodge 148. Y'all are part of that, and they were the big players in this whole big area back in the day, with putting up the money for the home and school and all that kind of stuff. So, you know, y'all had a big history there, and here's a little town just not too far that was doing things that were, for that town, was a big deal. And most of the leaders and people that ran Weatherford were members of that lodge. And when you're talking about names like Oliver Loving and Charles Goodnight, people like that, it's pretty impressive. The guy that was governor of Texas, Samuel Latham. You know, for a little, you expect that from a big lodge that had literally thousands and thousands in its membership, as 148, and your commandery was just huge, largest in the world at one time. But then here you have little Weatherford, Texas, and you got its own type of leadership and men that belong to it. And I think that's what makes it kind of special.
That's the history.
Yeah. And so we've pretty much covered every question that we've got, well, except for one. And that one is related to the West mentality, the history of Weatherford Lodge, and of two men that you just talked about.
I didn't see this question.
Springtown Chapter and Council recently got approval to rename itself Goodnight Loving Chapter and Goodnight Loving Council. Can you guys tell me more about Oliver Loving and Charles Goodnight?
Simple. Oliver Loving and Charles Goodnight were the ideal Masons.
Really?
I'm serious.
The ideal Masons.
Did you know there's no documented proof that they ever sat in lodge together? They're both members of Phoenix, but there's no documented proof that they ever sat in lodge together in Phoenix.
Really?
Yes, that's crazy. So Oliver Loving was a member of Ocean Lodge 230 that was the first lodge in Weatherford, chartered around 1850s, late 1850s, lost its charter, and then, of course, they created Phoenix in 1864. And Oliver Loving's big job was supplying cattle to the Confederacy. And the rumor was that Oliver Loving was owed between $100,000 to $250,000 from the Confederates. Yes, at the end of the Civil War. And actually, if you look at the Dexter Salmons, who's a past master of Phoenix Lodge and a past master of Texas Lodge of Research, and who's a good friend and an awesome guy to sit around and just talk to about this stuff to, wrote a great book, Phoenix Lodge, the first 25 years, and goes on after the Civil War. Actually, Oliver Loving was one of the first charter members of Phoenix Lodge and owed the lodge back dues for his membership. Well, the Confederate dollar wasn't worth anything after the war, and so they shrunk it down to where it came out to almost nothing to help him. So he got back in good graces. Of course, Charles Goodnight meets his wife, Ann Dyer, there. She's a school teacher in Weatherford. 1866, they hit the trail. They take it from Fort Belknap, Fort Concho, Ricky's favorite place, and then they go west and they come up around Fort Sumner and go on up into Colorado, and they're taking Longhorns because the markets bring more money over there and so forth. And then in 1867, of course, the faithful trip. They going out west, in between in West Texas. Oliver Loving, of course, gets attacked with another guy who's one arm. I can't think of that guy's name right now. Anyways, winds up in Fort Sumner, and the doctor there, instead of like in the movie Lonesome Dove where he has the arrow in his leg, it was in his arm. And the doctor there did not feel comfortable amputating the arm. Never done it before. So he's like, I don't know what to do, but I don't want to cut your arm off. I've never done it.
You're going to die.
So basically, we're just going to sit here because there was no antibiotics. There was nothing. So Charles Goodnight arrives, and they have this, must have been a pretty amazing conversation because Oliver Loving was 31 years old. He was actually older than Charles Goodnight at the time. Just kids. Think about it.
Yeah.
And he starts, hey, I need you, I don't want to be buried in a foreign soil. I want to be buried back home, da-da-da, da-da-da. So he dies. Gangrene. Charles Goodnight, they put his body, they leave the body there, and they finish the drive, come back. J.C. Loving is master of Phoenix Lodge at that time and goes to Fort Sumner with Charles Goodnight and a couple other guys and retrieves the body in, I believe it was March of the following year, 1868 this time, retrieves the body of Oliver Loving as a promise that he made he would do that for him. And the rumor is, from that day forward, Charles Goodnight always carried a picture of Oliver Loving on him. Both Masons, it was kind of a Masonic promise, I guess you could say. And they carried his body back to Weatherford. It was buried out there at Greenwood Cemetery. and his son was the master of Phoenix Lodge, J.C. Loving, who would eventually become the first secretary of the Southwestern Cattle Raisers Association. He was the first secretary of it. But the odd thing about it is, we have the minute book from all this time, 1860s, but the pages for the funeral have been removed for Oliver Loving. Very interesting.
Wow.
Very interesting. When Dexter was doing his investigation of Oliver Loving, Charles Goodnight saga, Lonesome Dove, and all this stuff, the minute book, we have the minute book, and those pages for the funeral would be missing, torn out.
Larry McMurtry needed them.
But yeah, that's pretty. But if you think about it, Masonry, the promise that, hey, we're both Masons, both members of Phoenix Lodge at the time. Back in the days, you could only belong to one lodge.
Yeah.
That's when you have this guy, well, I moved to Pecos, I deminted out here, I joined here, hey, I moved to Sweetwater, demit out here, I'm over here now, da-da-da. And that's what Masonry is, the friendship, the bond that we create. And that's a hell of a bond right there to come back and honor somebody like that.
That's amazing, yeah. It's super moving.
And then you get Charles Goodnight goes up to the Panhandle, creates the J.A. Ranch partnership. Boom, boom, boom. Here he is, and he's a cattle baron. Everybody thinks of him.
Yeah.
Oliver Loving.
What do you think happened to the missing pages and why?
And I've asked Dexter that. Well, Dexter used to live in an old red house there in Weatherford, and we used to go over there and just talk. And he's, and Dexter was a pretty interesting guy. You carry on a conversation, and he'd be like, I've thought about that stuff. The Bible cover, very interesting story in reference to this Phoenix Lodge deal. The Bible cover to the original Bible of Phoenix Lodge is there at Phoenix Lodge. It was missing. So when Dexter was writing his book, he made this plea, he took this plea out to everybody. He says, hey, check your attics, check everything you have. See if you can have any of our lodge history, because who knows where it was at. And they found the Bible cover to the original Phoenix Lodge, 1864, at somebody's house.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, what's crazy was we were in that carpet store that's down there, and we moved to where we're at now in like the 78, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
And so the lodge's been there since, 78, 79, 80. Been there. And stuff's been in it, came from the old lodge. They were looking around and they found the old tracing boards from 1865.
Wow.
But just crazy. Yeah. And DP took them and had them professionally framed and matted and stuff.
Those are the ones hanging in the
Yeah,
lodge?
the lecture,
yeah, for the lectures.
Yeah,
and he does the lectures from those tracing boards. But it was crazy.
Legal?
They had been been in the lodge all that time and nobody knew.
So do you think the missing minutes are in the lodge room building somewhere, or maybe in somebody's attic?
Who knows?
Who knows? It's pretty. That's a interesting story. Where are they?
Maybe they're with the one missing tracing board you have. Yeah,
you're right. We got the minutes from when they did the cornerstone for the from the courthouse and the Masonic Institute that became Weatherford College.
Mm-hmm.
And they had the Indian raids came and stopped it, and they had to fight them off and all that stuff.
And what I've
crazy,
just by mistake, just by accident, Weatherford. The reason Ocean Lodge, which later became Phoenix, closed because they went to a lodge called Relief Lodge, and they were doing a degree on a guy. And Relief Lodge actually is nowhere close to here. Relief Lodge is out by Corsicana, Texas.
Oh my gosh, that's far.
Yes.
The guy was a member there. He was a fellow craft and got the guys at Ocean Lodge to, hey, I need my master's degree. And so they went over there and they said, hey, y'all need to confer a master's degree on this guy. And the master says, it ain't happening. And the master left the lodge, but did not take the charter. And the members of Ocean Lodge conferred the master's degree at Relief Lodge,
Relief Lodge.
on that guy.
Oh, wow.
So it goes back to the district deputy. Oh, man. Goes to the Grand Master. Grand Master, jerk that charter. Boom. Gone. And here we are.
So the
Don't confer degrees on people you don't know.
The great, the great story about that is you would think Relief Lodge would be close to here, but it wasn't. It was out by Corsicana.
So they went all that way just to go
did.
get their charter
in a
yanked.
town called Cairns. Okay?
Okay.
So I, being the history guy I am, I found these two old pillars. They were hand spun. The globes are wood. The spun's got the old square nails in it and stuff. We go back and I end up buying them. They were from Relief Lodge in Cairns, Texas. And in their book, they merged with Corsicana, so we went through their books to make sure when they bought these pillars, and they were from 1858 or something like that. It was crazy. And then later on, we put two and two together of where Ocean Lodge lost their charter, and it was at Relief Lodge out there, and I actually have those pillars.
They were sitting in the room when that happened.
So who knows?
You know, the crazy thing about that guy, he was, they lose the charter, Phoenix gets a charter, da-da-da, here we are. The guy petitions Phoenix to join at least 12, 13, 14, 15 times, and they don't let him in. They finally let him in. And then he creates so much havoc and hate and discontent, they bring him up on charges for something and they kick him out. He's done. They had a trial and kicked him out of Masonry. And he was the...
And he's
all for
why
that
Phoenix
guy,
Lodge
and he's gone.
exists.
He got our charter pulled. Thank you.
It's
Crazy.
So many good stories.
You don't read a good book, read that book.
Yes.
You've got the Fraternal Quote, I think.
All right,
You have
yeah.
a quote?
So the quote of the week that we're ending this podcast with is the following: "The secret of Masonry, like the secret of life, can be known only by those who work it, seek it, serve it, live it. It cannot be uttered. It can only be felt and acted. It is, in fact, an open secret, and each man knows it according to his quest and capacity. Like all things worth knowing, no one can know it for another, and no man can know it alone." And that quote is actually by Dr. Joseph Fort Newton, who was a Baptist minister and a Masonic author, born right up the street here in Decatur, Texas, and served as the Grand Prelate of the Grand Encampment of Knights Templar in 1929.
Wow.
Yep. So,
Dr. Newton.
before we do our closing thoughts, our contact info is www.fortworth148.org. We are at Fort Worth Lodge 148 on Facebook. Our email is fortworthlodge148@gmail.com. And make sure to mark your calendars for July 25th, 2020 for Texas MasonicCon 2020. Folks, let's do some closing thoughts. Let's do, I guess, the traditional format here.
Me first.
Myself, Evie, and then we'll have Ricky and DP.
Let me get a deep breath for a long-winded answer. I feel like I need to be part of the crew. No, for me, this whole conversation really highlights the beautiful part of Masonry of going and visiting and meeting new guys. So really, my final thought is more of a challenge. If you're not big visiting, even if you are, go out and visit a new lodge, find somebody you hadn't met, get to know them. It's that simple, man. The magic will start happening. Evie, Billy?
All right. So as you mentioned a couple of hours ago,
Yeah.
Masonry is it's all about the friendships and the connections you build, right? And I think an example of that is us sitting here and just having a good time and sharing this conversation. This is like an extended version of that parking lot Masonry. And I think it's something that is really as vital to being an active and important part of Masonry as anything else, as the ritual. It's those connections, I think, that are really the heart of what Masonry is about. So,
I was going to say, I've been very excited to do this podcast episode because ages ago, going on upwards of a year now, we reached out to Ricky, and then we reached out to DP as well. We were like, man, we should get you guys on the podcast. I think at the time we were kind of talking about getting them one-on-one, and not, the conversation wasn't both of y'all together.
That's boring.
But, you know, it was this idea, and then Ricky said, oh yeah, I gotta do this, and for as long as we've pitched that idea, Ricky has been bugging us about, when am I coming on the podcast?
Absolutely, constantly.
And
All we wanted was live phone calls, okay?
That's all I want.
I'm very happy that we finally got to sit them down for this. So, but no, this is, you know, being out here at Ricky's place is a charm, and it's getting to hang out with some of my very best friends, none of whom I would know without Masonry. I mean, there is no conceivable way in my mind that I would have ever run into any of y'all outside of the craft. Maybe if I needed an AC fixed, but I'm a millennial and I'm broke and I can't afford to own my own home, so my landlord does that. Maybe if I needed a pair of boots, but I don't know that I would have driven to Weatherford for a pair of boots.
I wouldn't talk to you. You have too many tattoos.
Yeah.
I think he's got Air Jordans.
What's your name again, boy?
Are those
I was going to
papers?
say, maybe if I was going to go buy a pair of boots, he said while wearing Jordans. But yeah, no, this is, you know, and it's all because of Masonry. I wouldn't know either of you guys.
Yeah.
So I'm very grateful for that.
There are pros and cons to Masonry.
One of them is having to hang out with me. Evve, what about you?
Gosh, I mean, this was kind of a mind-blowing episode, I think, where it's the big take. You guys have all talked about, you know, the different aspects of like the traveling and those aspects. I think that the thing that I'm really taking home is that that being an active member it's a verb. It's an activity, and you can't be a passive Mason. If you are, you're really not a Mason. And so I think that that's the thing that is really important here, is to remind each and every one of us and hold ourselves accountable that to get the most out of Masonry, we have to be the active, self-starting promoters, cheerleaders, go-getters of this fraternity, if we really want to make a difference in it. So that's my closing thoughts.
Ricky, DP, at this point, we'll open up the floor to y'all for your closing thoughts. We do ask that you keep it to 45 minutes or less.
I got a story.
Quick story, boys.
It pertains to it.
There was a guy named Smokey the Bandit.
Is this the one
Go
about
ahead,
Little
Ricky.
Leaguers and Big
So, I want to say thanks for inviting us on the show. We weren't begging. We just wanted it to be live where people could call in and we could take phone calls.
That's the next episode.
And we answer the questions of the people watching.
Well, you had it on Facebook Live.
Yes. I can say it's been great. It's a great night to sit out here on this balcony, and from where we're at in Weatherford, we can see the courthouse in downtown Fort Worth because we're up that high, and which kind of ties their lodge in with ours, kind of, sort of. So I can say that it was a great episode. I'm glad that I got to do it with DP because we've done a lot of crap together. So, and I'm very thankful to be a member of this fraternity and to have all you guys, not just you guys here, but all the people listening as friends. Because even if you're strangers, you know, the strangers are just friends you haven't met yet. So thank y'all for being out here and staying with us for, you know, almost 4 hours.
Almost.
So,
I gotta drag it out.
DP.
3 minutes to midnight.
Also, like Ricky said, guys, I appreciate it. Having the opportunity to actually have these questions asked, because I'm not that kind of guy that, y'all know me pretty well, I think. I want to try to do what's best for the fraternity and for Masonry in general, and it's a hard thing to do, and as Rev says, we need participation more than anything. You got to be active. You got to be there. Not saying you got to be there every time the door's open like at church. No, but if you have a voice and you need to use that voice in your lodge or chapter, council, commandery, whatever, be there and be a part of it, and it'll make things a lot better for your lodge or whatever your chapter, council, commandery. I look forward to having this conversation. I'm almost at midnight. I'm a minute away. But I look forward to having this other conversation a year from now, where we can sit here and we can talk about all these things again and say, man, do you remember when you said this and that? And I say, no, I don't.
Hit play.
Because it will be completely different answers, I guarantee you. But 148 is a great lodge to belong to, I guarantee you. They've got a lot of movers and shakers over there, and the guys get stuff done. They do good degree work, which I highly recommend. And, look at this. Y'all came up with this podcast.
Yes.
And how many people...
He came up with that podcast.
Rhit, this is your deal?
Yeah, this is his baby.
How many people, there's no telling how many people listen to this thing and look for it every, what do y'all release it, every 2 weeks?
Yeah.
Look forward to it. Saying, what is it going to be?
I love listening to it. And
What book, Arthur? What, y'all got a woodworker guy coming on? What's the deal?
So I visited a commander in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I was asked about the podcast because there was a guy who listens there regularly who was a member of that commander.
That's awesome. See what
I was at the time Springtown chapter, and you were the senior deacon, and I was the assistant to the senior deacon in the Mark Master's degree, and we're BSing with the candidate right before we walk into the chapter room, and we're preparing him, and he asked me, "Where do I know you from?" And I said, I'm not a member out here, and, I don't really recall. Have we met at Fort Worth Scottish Rite? He says, no, I'm not a member of the Scottish Rite. What lodge are you from? I said, I'm from Fort Worth Lodge. Are you Gabe? He said,
Can I have your autograph before
and
we
he
get
said,
started?
I listened to your podcast.
Sign it on this apron right here.
your voice is like the boots.
Actually, you know what's funny is I just did a candidate investigation, and the candidate was like, I probably know way more about you than you know about me because I listened to the podcast. And as we were talking and having conversations, he's like, I remember you talking about that on the podcast.
You're Silent Billy.
Go ahead,
Y'all
Billy.
need nicknames. That's what y'all need to do. Nicknames for your guys in the pod.
Handles, our
Yeah,
podcast
like
handles.
a CV handle. Yeah.
Well, I think
Ratchet
Breaker.
Jaw.
Breaker.
Ratchet Jaw.
This is
Encyclopedia.
Well, you hit Gabe's on the nail there, right
Britannica.
there.
Yep. I think Evve's is really easy. He's Rev now.
Rev.
Because for anybody that doesn't know, we were sitting in Ricky's kitchen right before the podcast started, and I told Ricky, his name is not Rev, and he says, I know, but I like it.
Rev Run.
So I just pulled it up, and when this episode's released, we'll pass 37,000 downloads for the whole since we've been doing this. So
crazy.
It's getting out there.
Man. And so
Who would have thought?
off of this, because I think there's a need, because social media and this kind of stuff is it's a need for it in this organization.
Yeah, obviously, yeah.
So
And normally Ricky and I charge y'all.
Yeah.
Charge for us to come talk.
we talked about this earlier. I'm hoping that we can start some kind of York Rite one because I think York Rite is poorly promoted,
Yeah.
and it's a very important part of Masonry along with everything else. So hopefully we can do that and get questions, and y'all can teach us how to run that to give another avenue for people to enjoy, especially whenever y'all take breaks and stuff. Because when y'all take a break, I'm not kidding you, it's like like my son went to college. You know,
Yeah, it's
almost.
like, oh, what's
So,
happened?
where are they?
Where are
I
they?
went in distress.
All right, gentlemen, we ready to wrap her up then?
Sure thing.
This is Rhit Moore signing off.
This is Billy Hamilton signing off.
This is Gabe Jagush signing off.
This is Evve Kuykendall signing off.
This is Ricky Cox signing off.
And this is Don Paul Payton signing off.